Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. We're a few minutes late. We were waiting for one commissioner, but when he shows up, we'll mark him present also. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Joanne, could you do roll call? Here.
Here. Here.
Okay. When Bill shows up, we'll mark him present. County Advisory Boards, could you just please stand and introduce yourself?
Brad Johnston, Lyon County. Bill Yarnick, Carson.
Tom Casanelli, Humboldt County.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County.
Dave Bradfield, Lincoln.
Jim Brown, Churchill.
Joe Krim, Pershing.
Glenn Bunch, Mineral.
Mike Reese, Clark County.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 21, approval of agenda. Any questions, comments, concerns on today's agenda? This is an action item. Does anybody in the public have anything on the agenda that we need to discuss? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for a motion.
Move to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? 8 with 1 absent. Member announcements. Does anybody have anything that they want to bring up? The only announcement I have, Commissioner Wallace.
Just real quick, I announced it yesterday, but wanted to do it again for any CAB members that may not have been here. The Elk Damage and Incentive Committee met, and we are working on an antlerless elk landowner tag program. And I just wanted it to be on your radar. We're going to have another telephonic meeting to finalize some of the details, but it will be into your packets for the December information, and we're going to bring it before the commission in December.
Okay, the only announcement I have is we have a full agenda today. And we have airplanes to catch and a bunch of things to do and a lot of people that want to speak on some items. So we are not going to take any breaks from now till noon. We will take lunch, but if you need to use the restroom or anything, excuse yourself, and we're just going to keep plugging through because we've got a long day ahead of us. Any other announcements? Seeing none, I'll close agenda item 22 and move on to agenda item 23. County Advisory Boards, do you have anything you want to bring forward that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll close 23 and move on to 24. Second reading of Commission Policy 23, Predation Management. Commissioner Macbeth.
Okay, what is everybody's pleasure on this? How do you want me to walk through it again, or you want to put it out for questions, or what's the?
I believe we thoroughly reviewed it yesterday. That's what the point of the workshop is, and unless there's something that we need to change that you didn't like yesterday you want to discuss, we can take it out to public comment and then bring it back for final go.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea.
Okay, we're going to go to public comment on agenda item number 24, second reading of Commission Policy number 23. Rex?
Rex Flowers, Washoe County. With all due respect to the commission, I would ask that you delay taking a final vote on this until it gets back to the CABs for one more review. I know the statement's been made that this has been out there since May, but it should be noted that even the committee has had a tough time trying to find their way through it. It's a very good piece of work. now that it's done. But it took them a long time to get there, and I don't think it would hurt to allow the cabs one more opportunity. Thank you.
Mr. Reese?
Mike Reese, Clark County Cab. I echo Rex's comments. Clark County did not get to hear this item at our last cab meeting. We ran out of time, and with some of the changes that went in and some of the discussion, I'd like to vet it through our cab. We're one of the largest ones down here, and we didn't even get to talk about it. So I'd like to see it on the next agenda. Thank you.
Mr. Lent?
Jerry Lent from the Nevada Hunter Association, and again, I'd like my comments included in the minutes of the meeting and all dissemination of the minutes. I think this policy should be sent back to the cabs and the public for review. There's no way that anyone could, it's never been in writing, and there's no way anyone could follow it. And I think the NDOW used a continuation of meetings to get around NRS 501-177, which says you can only have 9 meetings, and the Administrative Procedures Act, NRS 233B-061. It's unlawful, and I oppose the commission taking action on this item with one meeting. And if you look at NRS 233B-038, it says regulation defined, it defines regulation. The classification of wildlife or the designation of seasons for hunting, fishing, trapping, and I think this borders on a regulation, and it defines that. And if you look at 233B-039, applicability, it says these following agencies are exempted from the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Chapter, and there's no wildlife exemptions in here. The governor, and it lists all the exemptions, so the Department of Wildlife is not exempt from 233B. And if you look at 233B-066, it says a description of how public comment was solicited, a summary of the public response, an explanation of how other interested persons may obtain a copy of the summary must be provided. I do not see that happening. If you look at 233B-061, it says an agency shall conduct at least one workshop to solicit comments and post it not less than 15 days before the workshop. And an agency shall not hold the public hearing required pursuant to subsection 3 on the same day that the agency holds a workshop required. And NDOW is getting around this with their seasons and regulations by doing it on 2 different days, but they're continuing it because you can only have 9 meetings a year. And I think that's illegal, even if you do fishing seasons, have them on a Friday and make the final decision on a Saturday, and you're calling it 2 meetings, but it's the same meeting because you do not adjourn the meeting. You continue it. It's 1 meeting, and I think that it violates the Administrative Procedures Law. And if you look at the Senate hearings in 2007, when this went into effect, and Senator Weiner brought that up, and she said basically the reason for this 2 hearings, and if you look at all the testimony about the Labor Commission stopped the regulation because they made, the public was at a disadvantage because they made a regulation in the morning or as workshop, and they passed a regulation in the afternoon, and the public is at the disadvantage. Just like the sportsmen are disadvantaged to try to understand what this thing that you passed yesterday is all about. And and if you look through the history of this, there's a reason for doing this. And the agencies will often come to the workshop and go immediately into the regulatory process, which is essentially what you did the next day, today. Representatives come to those meetings, then do not have the opportunity to review the intended changes with the people they represent, and that's exactly true. The cabs do not have an opportunity to do this. And this presents what they said in the legislature, the intent, the ram and jam policies. And that's exactly what this is. It's a ram and jam policy. And that's quoted in the history of the changes made in this bill by Senator Weiner in 2007. And you're trying to ram and jam it down our throat without us even trying to understand it. And I defy anybody in this room to understand what you put up in that screen yesterday and show me where you've given me a copy of it with all the changes. I do not see a copy of it. And I think it should go to the CABs and it should go out to the public for comment. I don't care how many committee meetings you had. You change it. Every time you have a meeting, you keep changing it. And like I questioned yesterday with Chairman Macbeth of the committee, I said, where are the changes that you made before? And you said because of the open meeting law, you couldn't publish them. And so I couldn't even read the changes for this meeting. And so I think it's really unlawful because this borders on a regulation to ram it down our throats on the same meeting. This is one meeting. Even though it's 2 days, it's one meeting. And that's not the intent of the 233B. Thank you.
Anybody else? Come on up.
Mike Laughlin for the record. I'm not really clear on exactly how all this came down yesterday. I'm kind of like Dr. Lent. Do I understand, and am I correct in saying in these projects, there's only 3 projects that are on the ground, lethal control, and the rest of the projects are either wildlife studies?
We're not talking
Or
about
whatever.
projects, we're talking about the plan at this point.
Or is that,
We're
What'd you say?
talking about the policy, we're not talking about the plan at this point. You're going over the.
well, it goes right back. People don't understand what we're doing here, including me. I don't understand. This thing needs to be deciphered by a number of people, sent back out so someone can look at it. I've been asked by my constituents, the Elko County Commissioners, to report back to them because there was nobody here from the CAB. So I would like to have some way or other, something to tell them to where it makes sense rather than mudding around. I think I'm exactly agreeing with this gentleman right here. You're ramming and jamming this right down somebody's throat to get out. You're sick of doing it. You don't want to do it, and so you want to get rid of it. And I think that's a very poor way to do business. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, thank you for the record, John Carpenter, and I would just ask you to please send this back to the public and the CAB so that they have a chance to read it and understand it, and it may be fine, but maybe there's things in there that maybe need to be changed. There's a lot of discussion went on yesterday, and I think that it's only fair that it goes back to the public and the CABs. Thank you.
Danny?
Dane Bradfield, Lincoln County. First of all, I'd like to thank all the committee members that have been on this. This has been chewed up and spit out and regurgitated several times and concise, and I think it's come a long way. Our CAB recommendation was to look at a policy that's a little broader and allows a little more flexibility, and I believe that some of the changes that were put into the policy yesterday allow for that. However, I also would like to take this back to my other CAB members so that we can look at it one more time with an issue that's this touchy. We've kind of hit a nerve on some things. Just make sure that we get it right. Anyway, my recommendation would be to bring it back to our CABs also.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Macbeth.
I sit up here and I listen to Dr. Lent, and I can't help but have this flashback to when he was the chairman of this commission and how he went through our policies and did the exact same thing that he is now accusing us of ramming and jamming. It's the hypocrisy of it is just a bit much for me, and so it's just amazing to me that somebody can have that kind of conduct when he's up here on this in this meeting, running these meetings, and then turn around and get on the podium and criticize us for the exact same conduct that he perpetrated, actually created. This was a methodology that he created. And so the hypocrisy was just a little bit too much. I have to make the comment. But that said, You know, we have gone over this since May in detail, this policy, and we have made, you know, changes all the way along, taken a ton of, you know, input, and we have taken a lot of time. A lot of the members of this committee really did get into this policy and, you know, make very good, constructive comments and suggestions for change that were, you know, I want to say everything was pretty much, you know, with the exception of the last issue we dealt with, was probably pretty much a consensus. But I will leave it to the rest of the commission to decide whether we, you know, push this off to December and go one more time. I actually would like to see it implemented as soon as possible, and the reason is because the way the policy reads, if we were to implement it now, then NDOW would have to do their best to put together a report, a status report of the prior projects that we then would have when we rolled into, you know, into February for consideration of the new plan for the following fiscal year. And so that's my only concern. And if we did delay it till December, then the question is, will we have that status report? Or if we did delay it to December, could we instruct the department to still have that status report put together so we have the benefit of it for the February meeting? So that's really what I like the commissioners to consider when we decide whether we're going to push this forward or not. You know, I always, you know, like to err on the side of, you know, being conservative and you know, to be quite honest, I wouldn't mind one more time reading through it. We made a lot of changes, and I'd like to see a final document and do a final read, and if, you know, maybe something else will pop out. But I think, you know, that's where I'm at on it, and so I'm kind of hoping that maybe some of the other commissioners will weigh in on the issue of whether we push it forward one more meeting.
Commissioner McNish.
I'm in favor of putting it off until December. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. I think Director Wasley would help us out by getting those reports done by December. I think that that's not unreasonable to ask, and I think that considering that you know, that was on the table to approve today, you know, the department had to be thinking it might be coming anyway. So, you know, I think it's worth the time to let it come vet one more time. And I understand the energy and the time, and again, but I do appreciate your openness to moving it to December if we needed to, and I'd be in favor of that.
Commissioner Morai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, from my viewpoint, from the comments that we've heard, and to be honest, when we were going through that stuff yesterday, it was confusing for me to try to decipher with that red lettering and then the black, to try to put everything together in that format. So I don't have any problem at all with going to the December meeting with it.
Commissioner Lane.
You know, I understand the CABs wanting to go over it one more time, and I know certainly in Clark County that hasn't been done because of other issues. But my concern is that this policy has been basically set up on the legislation. You know, the biggest complaint that we've had about this whole ongoing effort is that we're always behind. We're always behind, and that's been the big push. And so I don't want to see us, and Commissioner Macbeth talks about the need, you know, under the schedule that we've got set, we're supposed to be getting a report. I don't want us to start getting behind for next year already, because we're that process is, if you want, if you look at that process, we're supposed to have everything done by next June. And we don't have that many meetings between now and June, and we have a lot of things that are going to be discussed. So I'm not convinced that we're going to make major changes based on, we may make changes in wording, but I mean, if you look at the policy itself, I just don't see that happening. But again, I'll leave it up to what the majority of the commission wants to do.
Anybody else? Commissioner Drew.
Yeah, I guess I'd just make a motion to table the second reading of policy number 23 to the December meeting with direction to staff to provide a clean copy of the changes that were made in the first reading for support material.
Can I ask that the motion be supplemented by a direction to staff to prepare the status report and have that ready for the December meeting?
Is the timing of the status report December or February?
The status report is, I believe, supposed to, let me just double check, but it's, I think it's supposed to be submitted to the commission on December.
And then maybe while we're looking that up, are we gonna have, is there gonna be anything on the ground by that time?
Yeah, no, the predation management plan, section 10 says the department shall prepare an annual predation management status report detailing results of the previous fiscal year's projects. This status report will be presented to the December commission meeting. So I would just, if we are going to delay it, and I have no problem with it, I almost would rather have one more good, hard reading through it to make sure it's just tight and clean, and more from just getting, getting it edited. I don't think substantively I have any other changes that I feel need to be made to it. But I just want to make sure it's a good, clean document. But at the same time, I would really like to see us not get behind and be prepared to go into the next fiscal year, plan consideration with good data.
So if we're gonna do the previous fiscal year, that would actually be 13, not the projects we approved yesterday.
Correct.
No, it would be, no, yeah, you're right. Yes, it would be the previous period. And I've realized that because those projects weren't put together in the format that we've now got set forth in the policy, that it's not going to be at the level that eventually we will get to once we get through a whole cycle of this. However, I do believe that we need to have some reporting as good a reporting as we possibly can get in December. So we have at least some time before we get to February to consider whether we should continue a project or whether we need to, end that project.
Do we need that in the form of a motion, or can we simply, I think it's pretty clear that that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, that's fine. That's something that's gonna be on that agenda anyhow, and we'll be prepared to bring that. We'll provide that clean copy, and we'll be ready to provide the program report at that time.
That's good enough for me. That's good enough for me. So if, we don't need to add it to motion, I'm fine. I just really feel that we need to, have something put together as soon as possible. At least by December, so we have until the February meeting to, because the February meeting is right at the beginning of February, and so, it only leaves us a little less than 2 months to start looking at all that.
I didn't hear a second on that motion, so
I
could we?
did second it, but
You
it was
sec-
in traffic, so yeah.
Okay.
So there's a second for it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Everybody clear on what the motion is? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed unanimous. We're moving on to item 25, Commission Regulation 14-01, Amendment 1, Migratory Waterfowl. And who's taking that one? It says Russell on here for.
That's a good question.
Rob? It looks like Rob's prepared, so.
Got it, Tony.
Thank you.
For the record, Rob Bonamici, Chief Game Warden. The federal framework, the reason for this federal framework states that each state may select 2 days per duck season and duck hunting zone designate them as waterfowl hunting days. The days must be held outside any regular season, on a weekend, holidays, or other non-school days when youth hunters have the maximum opportunity to participate. And the days may be held up to 14 days before or after the duck season frameworks, or within any split regular duck season. So what had happened is a miscalculation occurred during the season setting process at the August commission meeting, creating a situation where the youth hunt days for the northwest zone, and it refers to the postseason dates only, and the south zone, both dates were outside the federal framework. And so this amendment is to correct that. So you'll see that the proposed new dates for the 2013-14 season in the northwest zone changes from February 15th, 2014 to February 8th, 2014. And for the 2013-14 season in the southern zone, it's February 8th and 9th of 2014 instead of February 15th and 16th. So this just brings us into compliance with the federal framework.
Okay, any questions from the commission? Seeing none, I'll take it out to public for comment. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Drew.
Move to approve CR 14-01, amendment number 1 is presented by the department.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed unanimous. Item 26, Commissioner Regulation 13-14, fishing seasons, bag limits for 2014 through 2016. Chief of Fisheries, John Schoberg.
Mr. Chairman, Robb and Commission, for the record, John Schoberg, Chief of Fisheries. What I'd like to do, if it's acceptable to the Commission, we have a relatively small number of changes this year recommended in just 4 counties. I'll walk through these by county with some explanation. And then there were a couple of comments or recommendations we got from 2 of the wildlife advisory boards, and I'll mention those and then we can move on with that discussion. Starting with Churchill County, we are recommending a change in the existing regulation for Lahontan Reservoir, Carson River, and all waters in Lahontan Valley that would remove the reference to trout and mountain whitefish and reword it to read 15 game fish, of which not more than 5 may be black bass, 5 may be walleye, and 2 may be white bass or white bass hybrids or wipers longer than 15 inches total length. This adds that take restriction of no more than 2 fish to wipers over 15 inches, primarily to try to keep those in the system, because one of the reasons they've been introduced into Lahontan is to serve as predators on a lot of the forage fish. So it does not restrict that ability to take wipers smaller than that within that total limit of warm water game fish. Removal of the reference to 5 trout and 10 mountain whitefish is simply because they don't occur in these waters. It's a simplification to remove any confusion for anglers, and we don't believe it materially affects people's ability to take fish or affect the limit of the fish they typically take. In Humboldt County, for Chimney Reservoir, again, we're removing the reference to trout, because trout only occur very rarely and occasionally in Chimney. When they wash downstream, they're not a normal part of that fishery, to reduce confusion. And it would read 15 game fish, of which not more than 5 may be black bass, 5 may be walleye, and 2 may be white bass hybrid or wiper with a minimum length for white bass hybrids or wipers of 15 inches. Again, this changes the allowable take of wipers from 1 to 2, and primarily because we're trying to standardize that regulation for wipers across the waters where they occur to reduce some of that confusion for anglers and simplify the regulations. The second change in Humboldt County is just removal of a tackle restriction on Andorno Creek, Coleman Creek, and North Fork of Battle Creek, and that will be addressed through a CGR that will be provided at the December meeting. So that was not part of, it's not part of CR 1314, but we wanted to mention it because that was included in the information that was provided to the advisory boards. For Lyon County, for Lahontan Reservoir, Carson River, and all waters in Lahontan Valley, again standardizing that wording with what was used for Churchill County. 15 game fish, of which not more than 5 may be trout, 5 may be black bass, 5 may be walleye, 2 may be white bass or white bass hybrids, longer than 15 inches total length, and removing the reference to trout and whitefish for the same reasons as I gave for Churchill County. We also would suggest an additional edit, and this information hopefully was all, I believe it was all provided to the game boards prior to their meetings when we could, but we were suggesting another wording change, a minor edit that we didn't catch when this was distributed. For the proposed regulation, rather than saying Lahontan Reservoir and Carson River downstream from Dayton, it will just say Lahontan Reservoir, and that would allow the Carson River downstream from Dayton to revert to the general county regulation and just reduce some confusion there. What we're trying to do is avoid having a lot of unnecessary adjoining changes in regulation. This would standardize it and correct hopefully some confusion that this presents to anglers. The second change for Lyon County is Mason Valley Wildlife Management Area. This is a change for several of the ponds there which had a slot limit of no possession of black bass between 11 and 14 inches. This removes that that slot limit on bass crappie, North Ponds, Beaver Slough, and Walker River within the management area, Hinkson Slough, and the East Side Waterfowl Series ponds, and returns it to the former regulation of a minimum size of 14 inches. We found that based on feedback we've been getting that slot limit is confusing for anglers, and it doesn't seem to be achieving some of the things that we didn't hope that it would. And we've actually had some people express preference just to return to the old regulation, and we think that will accomplish the same goals and reduce some confusion for anglers. The other change at Mason Valley Wildlife Management Area is for the hatchery ponds and Coonsley Pond. The current regulation is 3 game fish, of which 3 game fish, and this we've changing that to add of which not more than 1 may be black bass. And the reason for that is that we use those ponds as a source to augment other fisheries with black bass when they're available, and putting that 1 fish limit on there just allows us to manage those ponds as we need to as a potential source of bass for transplant to other waters. The only other change we have in regulations is for Pershing County, for Rye Patch Reservoir in the Humboldt River, and that is a change to standardize the wiper limit to what we've also done for Lahontan Reservoir and Chimney, so that the regulation will now read for Rye Patch Reservoir and the Humboldt River, 25 game fish, of which not more than 5 may be trout, 5 may be walleye, 5 may be black bass, and, excuse me, my eyes aren't what they used to be, and 2 may be white bass rather than 5 previously. or white bass hybrids, which are over 15 inches total length rather than 14 in the previous regulation. And again, that, and white bass or white bass hybrids under 15 inches, formerly 14, total length may be included within the 25 game fish limit. So this, again, is just to standardize that regulation with other waters that have wipers in them. That comprises all of the recommended changes that we had. This was provided to all of the county wildlife advisory boards, and we received, from Douglas County, we received comments just concurring with our recommended edits that I mentioned today. With Churchill County, recommended that for the Carson River below Lahontan Reservoir, they accepted our recommendation for Lahontan Reservoir itself, but recommended that for Carson River below Lahontan Reservoir and all waters in Lahontan Valley, it be changed from 15 game fish, of which not more than 5 may be black bass and 5 may be walleye, to 25 game fish, of which not more than 5 may be black bass and 5 may be walleye. Washoe County supported all of our recommendations with an additional recommendation that for the Truckee River diversions and ditches, it be changed to 3 game fish, which is consistent with the regulation for the urban ponds in the Truckee Meadows. And White Pine County provided an edit, but unfortunately it wasn't real clear what it was, and there's no one here from White Pine County. I believe it concerned bass limits at Kirch, but they didn't provide any additional detail that we really understood what it was that they wanted. So I won't go into any further about that. And that was all the comments we had, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I had a discussion with the chairman of the White Pine County Advisory Board, and he had told me that they've been trying to work on a change in the black bass limit before July 1 at like 0 take or a reduced take, similar to what the Ruby Marshes are. And he said they've been working on it for a while, or it's been brought up, and nothing's really happened, and he didn't know why. And so, I mean, I don't know the whole background behind it or anything, but this is what he told me. And he said that there was some concern that maybe there's too many fish being taken before July 1, and that there is some concern for the population of those fish in those ponds.
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Bliss, I do know that our area biologist who's responsible for Kirch was at the game board meeting. And I know he had a discussion with them, or with at least some members of the county advisory board, that, yeah, we have been working on potential changes at Kirch. We've been doing a multi-year study to really get a better handle on what's going on with the bass, with the black bass population there. That's still in progress. We're going to be wrapping that up probably in 14 and analyzing the data, and then coming up with some recommendations there on the best way to proceed. But, you know, there's already substantial seasonal closures at Kirch, because the upper ends of several of the reservoirs are closed. I think it's January 1 through August 16th. So, you know, that's one of the strategies that could be an option, would be to look at additional closures, but it's one of several things that we could recommend.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll take it out to public comment.
Brad Johnston, Lyon County CAB. I'm sorry I didn't get our comments to the department. We just are a little bit confused because there's different language for Lahontan Reservoir, whether it's Churchill County or Lyon County. Page 5 is the change for Churchill County, and there's no reference to trout. Lyon County there is. We think that needs to be clarified. It's probably not a big issue given what the condition of Lahontan Reservoir and what's available there, but I don't think we should have inconsistent language.
And that was, and I'm sorry, I don't think,
Go ahead.
is my work? Yeah, my mic is working. That's a correction. That actually somehow got inserted in this part of the document, but it's not in the actual CR, the reference to trout.
Okay, because I thought I
It
saw.
shouldn't have been, so that's a correction to remove that.
All right, with that, then that correction, I guess, addresses that. Then the question was with the ponds at the Mason Valley Wildlife Management Area, there's a request from the public that that open earlier than August 16th, that perhaps it could open for fishing sometime in July, perhaps July 1. My understanding is the rationale might be protection of waterfowl, but the sentiment from the public was that by July 1, that would be late enough, so
Yeah,
that we
that-
could give people an opportunity to hunt, or not hunt, but fish in those ponds the month of July.
Yeah, that August 16th closure, I don't know the history of that regulation in Mason Valley, but that's a pretty consistent date across the state for management areas where there is fishing in waterfowl ponds. It's the same date as used at Kirch.
In any event, the public would like to see it changed to July 1st, so I'm passing that on. Thank you.
Come on up, Jim. Jim, or then Tom. Tom, Jim.
For the record, Tom Casanelli with Humboldt County. I too apologize if we didn't get our recommendations in, but we did concur with the department on all their changes in Humboldt County. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, it's your turn now. Jim, Rex, let Jim come up, and then, Jim, come on up, Jim.
Jim, you're on.
It's still in there.
That should not be in there, so
Right.
we'll fix that. That was just, we realized that it was so now I'm gonna reinsert it.
Understood. Yeah, we saw it.
Yeah, we'll fix that.
Jim Curran, Churchill County Wildlife Advisory Board. Our recommendation from the board was to totally support the department's recommendation to restrict the harvest on white bass hybrids over 15 inches in Lahontan Reservoir, both in Churchill and Lyon County. For quite a few years now, there's been a line item in the fishing regulations which said Lahontan Reservoir, the Carson River, and the waters within Lahontan Valley. What our proposal is just to literally separate the Lahontan Reservoir regulations from the Carson River, Lahontan Valley regulations. Those are two completely different types of waters. They're under completely different management regime from the department. You got to understand, especially those that aren't familiar with Lahontan Valley, is every fall, Lahontan Reservoir is turned off. The 500 miles of canals that people fish in Lahontan Valley, excuse me, are dewatered, dried up. Tens of thousands of fish die. A lot of the small regulatory reservoirs that sit within the valley are sucked dry by the irrigation district, and the fish die. The state, they do not plant wipers, white bass hybrid, in Lahontan Valley, strictly in Lahontan. The fish that are down through the system are basically escapees from Lahontan Valley, or from Lahontan Reservoir, and they're going to be lost. Historically, the limit within the Fallon-Lahontan Valley area historically was 25 game fish. It's mainly yellow belly, bullhead catfish, some white bass. Some fish do go on down into Stillwater, Carson Lake, the perennial marshes, and it provides a lot of fishing. We see no rationale, when most of these fish are going to be lost anyway, to put a restriction of 2 fish over 15 inches, white bass, in the waters below Lahontan Reservoir. There's no biological reason, there's no ethical reason. So we're recommending strictly a very minor change, and that is to go along with the department's recommendation for Lahontan Reservoir, which is 15 game fish, and then on down to the white bass of 15 inches. But we would like to strongly recommend that the Carson River and all waters in Lahontan Valley which are really artificial waters. Not include any restriction on white bass or white bass hybrids over 15 inches, and to raise the limit back up to what it was historically, 25 game fish, of not more than 5 may be black bass, excuse me, or 5 may be walleye, open all hours of the day and night. There's, say, all the waters below Lahontan Reservoir are basically non-managed waters, and I think it's irresponsible to put more restrictions when it's a very popular fishery. We're utilizing the fish right now. As of last Tuesday, the reservoir is shut off. All those miles of stream are now dry, and why not during the summer allow the anglers all the opportunity possible? Thank you.
Thank you. Rex, your turn.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County. On this 3 fish in the entirety of the Truckee River, we're proposing this and asking for it because word is that there was a petition going to come forward. This has been brought up the last 2 years at our advisory board meetings each year when we got to the fisheries times, that you can catch 5 fish in the river and plus assorted game fish, but you'd only have 3 game fish in urban ponds. So it was always known that it was needed to be realigned. And rather going through a petition process at a later date and taking up more time, this is a much easier way to handle it and the proper place to handle it here during bag setting, okay?
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Macbeth?
What is the department's response to Mr. Kern's statement on the Lahontan Valley?
Commissioner Macbeth, I tried to do a little research on this. It appears that change to 15 game fish and aligning it with the Lahontan Reservoir regulation for below Lahontan probably happened around 2000. Probably in part to try to standardize some regulations, and also I suspect because of issues that were coming up at the time about mercury consumption and mercury levels in fish, particularly in Lahontan Reservoir and below. So that may have been a driver for changing that to the lower limit. But we don't have any objection to what the Churchill County Board has proposed. I can't argue with most of what Mr. Curran said. I think he has some good points. We would prefer to see more standard regulations where we can, rather than a lot of variation based on artificial barriers, but we wouldn't be opposed to it if, as described by the Churchill County Game Board.
Is there a law enforcement issue? When you say standardized, is that what you're worried about? Is that that there might be some people that assert that they have been fishing in the ditches as opposed to the reservoir?
That's probably more theoretical than actual. We think it makes it easier for people, easier to understand if regulations are consistent where it's appropriate, but I don't think this is a situation where it would probably be a law enforcement issue at all.
Okay, well then, it just seems to me that what he said was just made all kinds of sense to me, and so I'd like to see the support what the Churchill Board is proposing there.
Yeah, the department wouldn't be opposed to, what he's recommended.
Commissioner Drew?
I guess I'd have the same question on the proposal for the Truckee River to go to a 3 trout limit. Any thoughts, comments on that?
Commissioner Drew, again, we were aware that petition was coming forward. There was a decision that it was going to be at the December commission meeting for consideration. We think that consistency, again, is probably a good idea. We don't see an issue with going to the 3 game fish limit for the river and associated ditches and canals. The advantage of the commission acting on it now is that it would make it a lot easier to make sure that it was in our printed regulations for next year, if it was approved. The disadvantage only is that I think one of the reasons why there was discussion of it being on the December agenda was that that meeting was in Reno, and there would be more opportunity for any local comment, because this came from just from the advisory board meeting last week. But we're not opposed to the change. You know, it makes some sense. There is another part to that petition, I believe, if I recall correctly, which was also to remove the tackle restrictions on the trophy area at the upper end of the river near, that I believe it is adjacent to State Line and Verdi. That's not part of this, and that's actually a separate process because it's a CGR, because it's a tackle restriction. So that, I believe, was part of the petition, was to remove that trophy area tackle restriction in the Verdi area, which is not part of the game board recommendation. That's my only other observation, but conceptually, we're not opposed to what they've recommended.
And you just brought up the trophy section up there on Verdi. It's not doing what it was meant to do, and we're not seeing angler days up there, and I know it's separate from what we're doing here, but can we start looking at that and making that water open again?
Yeah, Chairman Robb, absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't argue with that at all. It doesn't seem to be doing what the idea was, and in fact, I believe the petition that was going to be submitted to the commission on those changes included removal of that trophy section. So that's something that we could look at, and potentially, if the commission were to adopt Washoe County's recommended change today for the 3 game fish limit, we'd certainly take a look at that and see if that's something that we could proceed on as early as December, along with some other, a couple of other CGR changes that we've already mentioned that we need to clean up other tackle restrictions.
And the reason I ask the question, the petition process sometimes slows down good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather not run it through the petition process if it's something that makes sense right out of the gate. So if we can do it, I'd rather go that direction.
No, we're not opposed. We weren't opposed to the recommendations of the petition, and we wouldn't. You know, we're not opposed to what Washoe County has recommended.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions?
I got a comment.
Commissioner Young?
I'm not sure if it's the right time or not, but it's sad to see that, you know, there's a lot of talk about fishing around the state except for Clark County. And that's because there is no fishing down here. And I don't know what NDOW's plan is, but it's something that's on my mind and a lot of people in southern Nevada. And I've heard all the rhetoric and excuses about the hatchery and this and that and the other thing, but I moved down here from Fallon when I was 9 years old and fished all my life till about 10 years ago, and it's just gone. And it's impacted businesses in this community in a tremendous way, and it's sad to me that the only place a father or mother, for that matter, can take their kids fishing is at some city park. So, just my opinion.
Anything else? Commissioner Macbeth.
But thank God for those city parks. My 5-year-old grandson pulled a 26-inch catfish out last week, and I got a picture of him next to it. So thank you for the parks. But I would echo what Commissioner Young is saying about the state of Southern Nevada with regard to especially the fish hatchery.
Anybody else? Commissioner Drew, you took good enough notes to pull a motion out?
Yeah, I'll give it a stab. So I would move that we adopt the proposed changes presented by the department, including the one for Lyon County where we would strike the language "and Carson River downstream from Dayton." Motion would also be to include Churchill Cab's recommendation to separate the Carson River and all waters in Lahontan Valley, making that a 25 game fish limit with no more than 5 black bass and 5 walleye, and to incorporate the Washoe Cab recommendation for a 3 fish limit for the Truckee River and associated ditches and canals.
Second.
Did I miss any?
There were a couple other minor edits, and want to make sure you got those in there. The one was removing the reference to trout for Chimney Reservoir in Humboldt County. Maybe you mentioned that. And then, as the Lyon County Board pointed out, the reference to 5 maybe trout for Lahontan Reservoir for Lyon County. And that was in addition to the change of removing the reference to Carson River.
Yeah, we would include
Okay.
both of those editorial changes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to, they were minor. I just wanted to make sure we caught them.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or clarification needed? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed unanimous. Thank you. We're moving on to 27. Commission General Regulation 426, Desert Tortoises, LCB File R00413. Laura Richards.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Laura Richards, the Chief of the Wildlife Diversity Division. This regulation was workshopped yesterday. We didn't have any public comment at that time. Again, this is a permanent regulation based on a temporary regulation the commission passed back in March in Reno. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Anybody on the commission have any questions? Seeing none, I'll take it out to public comment. Anybody in the public have any comment? Dr. Moldy.
Mr. Chairman, Don Mulder, we don't have a comment, really a question. I saw the article in the Sacramento Bee here recently suggesting that the Desert Tortoise Sanctuary was going to be closed because the Fish and Wildlife Service is running out of money and tortoises had to be dispensed with in various ways. Turned out that I found out later that much of that information was not correct as the Bee presented it. But I'm curious, does this regulation facilitate the closure of that sanctuary if and when it occurs, or does it obstruct it, or does it in any way impact it? I didn't understand from the it sounded yesterday like this would be sympathetic to that action if it occurs. I just wanted to be clear about that.
Yes, this regulation is going to support that partnership of the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, Clark County, the tortoise group that are all trying to deal with this overbreeding problem. So the one tortoise regulation is really going to help that effort. We're working on different ways to deal with those numbers that are still coming in. The numbers are quite a bit lower this year so far. As I mentioned yesterday, there's 248 unwanted tortoises that have been turned in. The Tortoise Center, the Desert Tortoise Conservation Center, is running out of money, and so that's why we're working very closely with all these different partners to make sure that these tortoises can be adopted out, or those that are healthy enough can be translocated back to the wild.
Okay. Any other public comment? Any commission comment? No. Anybody got a motion? Commissioner Lane?
I just want to thank Ms. Richards for the work that she did when that Sacramento Bee article came out. It came out on Facebook actually from a couple of volunteers. And so I contacted her. She immediately sent some information. We were able to, put the right information out. So I just appreciate the efforts that were done in that, because I think there was a lot of misinformation, and I think this is a very important regulation that we need to support.
Okay. Commissioner McNitch.
So a question, and I know I talked to Laura about this yesterday. This goes back to LCB, is that right? Robb and I had talked about it at one time before too. Because that's why we're where we're at today, is we had to hang up an LCB, and I'm just asking, what's the prognosis from this point?
Yes, it will go back to LCB probably in October at some point. And we'll have Clark County representatives there supporting it, and all the other partners that need to be there will be there to help support getting through that legislative commission.
With that, I make a, oh, did you have?
You know, just to respond to Commissioner McNinch, one of the things that was a problem last time, and the reason that it got turned down was because there was a sentence in there that said, and shall not allow the desert tortoise to physically contact another desert tortoise. That's been taken out this time, so that hopefully will resolve the problem when we go to LCB. It only talks about, you're only allowed to have one desert tortoise if you adopt a desert tortoise, basically.
Okay. I thought that there were some other politics being played out, and I just was checking the, you know, how the politics were coming along, so. With that, I'll make a motion to approve CGR 426, LCB file number R004-13 as provided, recommended.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed unanimous. We're moving on to agenda item 28, Commission General Regulation 424, Transportation Permit, LCB file R003-13. Rob.
For the record, Robb Bonamici, Chief Game Warden. The Transportation Permit Regulation, LCB file number R003-13, was workshopped yesterday. There was no public comment, so we recommend passage as is.
Any questions of Rob? Seeing none, I'll take it out to public comment. Do we have public comment on this? Gil?
For the record, Gil Yana, Carson Advisory Board. One of our members recently had a experience with trying to get enough signatures on the tag and, you know, a witness and stuff, and it was a long, drawn-out process to make it short and sweet. The other thing they commented about was trying to cut out the square box in the middle. I don't have a tag, so I don't know what he was visually talking about, but he made the recommendation that, like some of the other states have triangles, boxes along the side of the tag, because I've seen those before, and that's a lot easier to cut out, because not everybody has a pair of scissors, you know, to cut the square out, he said, but cutting out the triangle with a hunting knife is pretty simple. So he was suggesting that the printing of the tag where you have the, you know, the transportation portion where you give it to somebody else to haul for you, be made up with those triangles on the outside edge of the tag permit to make it easier for the hunter to accomplish this issue of trying to give somebody else permission to haul the game back home while you're still out in the field.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Tom?
Tom Castanelli speaking on my own behalf. My concerns are the transportation permit and the taxidermy permit, not being able to split them up, because the issue I've run into while hunting with people is trying to get that meat home early, or the cape go in a different direction and head to a taxidermist at that point in time. And I would like to see us look into making each one of those permits tied to the, instead of having to have the cape and with the meat. I think that's really important for issue to resolve. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, can you help us with that and why it is the way it is? And if we don't go forward today with this, we've got tags, this expires November 1st, we'd have tags out there that wouldn't be legal with this, and we're kind of in a, if we do need to make that type of change that Mr. Castanelli spoke to, we'd have to do it a different way.
That, for the record, Robb Bonamici, that's correct. We'd have to kind of readdress the reg and do not a wholesale revision, but we'd have to do several revisions in here to make sure we can make it work. The reason being is we don't, it makes it very difficult for us in the field when you have a head going one way, the carcass going another way, and we're checking to see, make sure everything was in compliance and legally done. So that makes it a lot more problematic from an enforcement standpoint. You know, was the head, you know, was it a doe, was it a buck? Things like that, based on, you know, all they're required to retain is the cape above the eyes and so forth for evidence of sex. So it becomes somewhat problematic, not impossible, but it does become more problematic for us with the issues out there of people shooting other people's deer, things like that. It's just going to make it harder to track down.
Commissioner Bliss.
I brought this concern up yesterday, but after, you know, listening to you and stuff, I understand your side of it, and it'd be a bigger problem, I feel, on your side than it would be on our side. And I'm just speaking on behalf of, like, the program that I'm involved in, where we might have to, where we transport meat for people like that. It's just something that we will deal with, and because I understand the law enforcement side of it and what kind of headache it would be, and so I honestly don't have a problem with it.
Even though it doesn't get us all the way to what would help you out, it's a lot further than we were before, so. Anybody else have anything? Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Wallace.
Move to approve Commission General Regulation 424 Transportation Permit LCB file number R003-13 as presented by the department.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed unanimous. Commission General Regulation 427, Trapping Visitation Limit, LCB file number R018-13. Robb.
For the record, Robb Bonamici, Chief Game Warden. LCB file number R018-13 was workshopped yesterday. We heard a lot of public comment, especially centered around visitation and the definition of visitation. And our intent originally was simply to try and clarify definition of visitation. But in kind of thinking about it and looking at it from the perspective of what's our ultimate goal here, and our ultimate goal is to address the chronic violators. And so what a possible suggestion would be for consideration is to, instead of addressing it in the visitation and definition of visitation, address it through demerit points. Because as it stands right now, an individual can be cited once, receive 3 points, a second time, receive 3 demerit points, take hunter safety down to 2 demerit points, cited again, have 5 demerit points, cited again, have 8 demerit points, cited again, have 11 demerit points, and still be able to trap. So it takes 6 violations in a 60-month period, which is not an impossibility because we've had 5 in a 60-month period. So this would address the chronic trapper if demerit points, if say the trapping committee, it went to the trapping committee for consideration, and the trapping committee then looked at possibility of, like was mentioned yesterday, if we have an animal in the trap, then, you know, cite us, take us to jail, or whatever. Well, maybe if you have an animal in the trap, you fail to visit, it's a 9 or 12 demerit point violation. If you don't have an animal in the trap, it's a 6 demerit point violation. And that would take the chronic violator out of the system quicker. So that's a suggestion there. And then if that suggestion were agreeable to the commission, then we can fall back to what we had basically come out of the workshop in Fallon that Chairman or Commissioner Drew had mentioned yesterday, the language there. So up to the commission, whatever your pleasure.
Okay, Commissioner Lane.
Chief Bonamici, didn't you have a proposal for 12 demerits? I thought at one time when we talked about visitation, and then everybody got all upset because they were too busy looking at the one part of it and didn't see that part of it. That's what we were told, so we didn't discuss it at this time. And we never saw it again. I mean, I'm just I don't know what happened to that. But I guess I certainly think that would be one way to address it. But I do believe that we're going to have to be more specific in terms of defining visitation, because I just don't think that, from my standpoint, right now, and talking to other people, I think they're pretty amazed at some of the stuff that's going on out there, and they're calling it visiting the trap. So I guess I certainly, I thought we were going to do that as beyond what we were already doing. But I don't know where that went, but I still think we need to maybe go beyond what Commissioner Drew talked about that's being proposed right now, where Section 2 has been left out, so.
What I know is we need to get something in place for this upcoming season, and I know that we are going to have quite a few trapping committee meetings coming up. So I'm sure that a lot of these issues will be addressed. But the one thing I know for sure is we need to get something done today, and then properly run it through the trapping committee to come up with the best possible wording to cover law enforcement, to cover the trappers, and to get to where we need to get to. So, Commissioner Macbeth.
I actually, after thinking about this, well, first of all, I would recommend that if we're going to send it back to the trapping committee, that not only as to the demerit points, but to keep on the table the definition of visitation, to maybe have them have that as an option to consider. But when I think about this, and if we're really aiming to change behavior, having a 12-point demerit for having an animal in the trap and not visiting it within the 96 hours will give an incentive, a very large incentive to the trapper. And if they choose to check their traps in a way that is going to pose a risk to them losing their license, they may think twice about it, and so that may change behavior. That may be a better way to deal with it. I have a feeling that people will understand that risk a lot better, and there will be change. And so but I think it's a good thing for the trapping committee to look at, and so I'm okay with that. I am still concerned that the trappers have put out on the table that they should be able to visit traps via the use of optics. I just think that's bad, unethical, and I think it poses problems to the commission. But in the end, what we're really trying to do is change behavior, and I think the demerit point method might be the big stick that'll get it done.
Any other comment? Commissioner Drew.
I guess just to be clear, so everyone understands what was proposed in felon, I think what Rob referenced. So section 2 would read, a person is required pursuant to NRS 503.570 as amended by section 5 of Senate Bill number 213, chapter 231, statutes of Nevada 2013 at page 1002, to visit or cause to be visited a trap, snare, or similar device shall ensure that a trap, snare, similar device is visited at least once each 96 hours. Sub 1, by a person who is a holder of a trapping license issued by the department, and sub 2, in a manner which ensures that any animal caught in the trap, snare, or similar device is removed from the trap, snare, or similar device. So that's what I had. Rob, does that match with what you had?
Correct.
And then I guess my only question is, do you see any conflict with that and the exemption that we talked about late yesterday that's under NRS?
No, I think we're good there.
Okay. Just so before it goes out to public, we understand what at least I had proposed.
Commissioner Young and then Commissioner Lane.
I don't have a problem with what Chief Bonamici's proposing. You know, the law is pretty clear, it's mentioned yesterday, pretty concise and pretty easy to enforce under most circumstances. I'll equate it a little bit to DUI in this state. When I started on the police department in 1978, the legal limit was 1.5. And, you know, people got arrested all the time for DUI, much like you're talking about, and over and over, and you'd get cases 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 DUIs, and the fatality rate continued to rise in this state. But it wasn't until, and they kept moving the ball to 0.10. Now it's 0.08. No doubt in my mind, the next legislature, it's going to be 0.05. And that DUI deaths have continued to rise. But the one thing that they did do is that they started correlating the number of arrests, the arrest with some meat in it. It's frustrating in work in law enforcement to have a repeat offender 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, and nothing changes. So I like the idea of, hey, there's only a very tiny, small percentage of people that violate the law, period, across the board. It's minuscule. But when we get those people and they're repeat offenders, let's do something about them and get them out of the system, because it's just a big waste of time for law enforcement, which is a finite resource, the courts to deal with the cases. And, you know, I believe everybody should have a second chance. That's 2. But after 2 times, they shouldn't be allowed to trap anymore, or hunt, or drive a car. And that's the 3rd case now in this state is a felony for DUI. So there's no more 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. You're arrested, it doesn't matter if there's an accident, anybody's killed or not. The 3rd time, you got a felony record and you can go to prison. And that is greatly reducing the number of DUI accidents. So along those lines, I support what Chief Bonamici said.
Commissioner Lane.
Mr. Chair, I guess my concern is, you know, we've been discussing this issue of visitation without looking at the issue that right now this reg that we're looking at is proposing 96 hours, which is what it currently is. And I'm sure that all of you, as did I, received a large volume of emails from people who live in Nevada who you know, want us to go to 24 hours. And I understand the chair's issue that we've got to get this passed. I mean, we have to get this passed today because we're already behind the 8 ball here. I understand that. But I think that it's important that the people who sent us emails understand that this is an issue that we are going to be readdressing at the Trapping Committee meeting again this evening. So unfortunately, I think that whoever put that information out, they put out some misleading information. But I think we need to make it clear that this regulation is 96 hours, and it's kind of a stopgap measure to try to deal with the 2013 trapping season. But it's going to be continued to be addressed in the Trapping Committee at 6 o'clock this evening. So I don't want there to be any confusion.
And I have had conversations with 3 of the 5 senators on the Senate Natural Resource Committee about what we are doing here today, trying to get this 96 hours in place so we can do a more thorough review with the trapping committee to come up with where I believe they wanted us to go, and that's to look in urban areas of shortened trap check and make some changes that they believe the Wildlife Commission could review and come up with a better solution than they could through the legislative process. I believe that's why it was given back to us, is their process has to go, they have a bunch of stuff on their plate, and they can't do the thorough review that we can through the trapping committee and through the Wildlife Commission. So we need to get to 96 hours in place so we can make changes going forward for next year. With that being said, that works on the visitation issue. We have another issue coming up, and that's the registration. At that point, I've had a total different conversation with those three legislatures about registration. So we do need to get the 96 hours in place, but there's a big assumption that we are going to really review this through the trapping committee, and there will be changes coming, and that the 96 hours will not be statewide in following years. Anybody else? Commissioner Drew.
Yeah, I would just echo, I guess, what Commissioner Lane had mentioned about receiving a lot of correspondence on the issue, really on all sides of the issue, but there was a lot of correspondence that simply, it was kind of a blanket statement that the support was for a 24-hour statewide regulation. So just put that on the record. I think it went to everyone on the commission. I think most of them came through our common emails. So I don't think there's anything that I missed that had just come to me in that regards.
I did get the link that a lot of those emails were generated from, and I do not believe that all the commissioners did get the same emails. What I saw, there was 5 or 6 commissioners on the link, and I believe it left off Commissioner Bliss. There was approximately 300 emails I received. Commissioner Bliss was not on that list. Commissioner Macbeth and Commissioner Young, I believe, were left off that list, but the rest of us were copied through that email that went out. They didn't reference all of our emails, so we didn't all receive the same information. The email did say more and more traps for nuisance animals like raccoons, coyotes, skunks are being set near populated, well-traveled areas along trails where families hike. As a result, we've seen an increase in frequency of pets falling victims to traps. That was the email that was put out to generate the emails coming to us. And I want it on the record with that. Those statements concern me because I know that the trapping committee in the past and this commission have taken great strides in the trails around Washoe County, the Mount Charleston area, the setbacks. We have done a tremendous amount of work and made some very big changes to calm down what is being referenced in this email that generated the emails that came to 6 commissioners. And I just want that on the record that some of the stuff that they say I believe to be a little bit inaccurate, because we have made steps to protect companion animals, to protect families hiking on trails, to take the right steps in these urban areas as we've been asked to and required by the legislature. So I just want that on the record that, you know, this is how the emails came to a lot of us commissioners, and the information on it caused me a little bit of concern, because I know that we have taken steps as a commission to address some of these issues in the past. Anybody else? Seeing none, let's go to public comment. Ms. Swain?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wearing my billboard today to remind us and to remind everybody why we're doing all this. And the basic motivation is concern about animals and what they go through in a trap. So that's what my T-shirt says. And I appreciate very much what you're saying about acknowledging the emails. And I do regret that if there was any misinformation or that they didn't reach everyone, but I'm glad that you acknowledge the volume of mail, that these are citizens of Nevada. Each one is from a different citizen, and they are concerned, and they're voicing their opinion just like I am to you. So in the past, I'm not sure everybody acknowledged the emails this way, and I really appreciate that you did. And I appreciate very much what Commissioner McBath and Commissioner Young and Commissioner Lane are saying, because we do need that assurance. We're being asked to take on faith that this process will go forward. And I know you've assured us before, so I'm not debating that, but we just really appreciate the assurance that this process will go forward and that additional changes will be made. And we do acknowledge the trails that have been protected, and that is a very good thing. A few other things I wanted to bring up. About the optics, and I really appreciate Commissioner McBeth's position on that. And I don't completely understand, and perhaps you can help me understand. We're going to have the trapping committee tonight. If they decide, yes, we want to include optics in the regulation, is that going to, or will it be too late because you've already made a vote here at this time? Because I really feel that if we include the mention of the optics in the visitation, it would be I really would like to see that included in the language if we can do that.
We need to get something on the books today because we don't have anything. So that's the point of today. The point of the committee meeting tonight and follow-up committee meetings will be to review, as you say, optics. We're going to do a thorough review of visitation through that process. It will not be in place for this year. What we've set today will be what is in place for the following trapping season. Anything we change through the committee will go into place in next year's trapping committee. It will not be on the books for this year.
I do appreciate that, and that was my concern because I was hoping we could get something on the books regarding the question of visitation in person or the use of the optics. I appreciate that. I also appreciate Commissioner Drew's use of the word animal. That's something I've been wanting for a long time, and the more inclusive term I really do appreciate rather than all about fur-bearing, who's a fur-bearing mammal or who's whatever, to remove birds or whoever is caught in a trap. So I appreciate the use of the word animal wherever we can use it in the language. What else did I have? I think that's it. We can save anything else for tonight, and I appreciate very much what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Dr. Moldy and then Joel.
Mr. Chairman, Don Moldy-Reno, three things. One, I think what you should do today is just pass the 96-hour thing. Forget about the visitation, let the trapping committee take that up and refine it. The second thing, I love the demerit idea. And I think that there's an extra reason for thinking about increasing the heft of the demerits. Because what hasn't been mentioned today is the economic incentive the trappers have to kill animals, specifically the bobcat, which can stick $5, $6, $7, $8, $100 or $100 or $1,000 in a guy's pocket for killing one animal. And I think to some extent that may override one's sense of civic responsibility in terms of following rules and so on, depending on the person's character. So I like the demerit idea. The third thing is that visitation of traps is a very complex question, and to some extent I agree with Mr. Blakesley's position that trappers go visit their traps. On the other hand, I've seen quite a number of trap sites in my day, and I've seen a number of traps that have had animals in them, and I've seen bobcats in traps that you didn't know were caught in a trap until you literally walked up to the trap site and the bobcat gave you a growl from under a bush or in the thicket of the sagebrush or from under the pinyon or the juniper bushes or wherever it was. I saw a coyote in a trap one time that you could have seen from a half a mile away with a spotting scope. The non-target victim data I gave you yesterday suggests that you could easily have a rabbit or a pack rabbit or a bird caught in a trap that a trapper wouldn't see with optics from some distance away, or the A rabbit might not dislodge the flag that somebody stuck on a bamboo pole that's supposed to be dislodged when a bobcat gets caught in the trap and thrashes around and dumps the flag so the trapper knows something is there. So I think optics are reasonable in some situations, and other situations clearly not. And you're sort of in a situation with a fishing deal where if you make special wrinkles and regulations here and there, pretty soon you have no regulations at all. You got a bunch of special circumstances. So if we're going to create a visitation regulation that has some meaning to it, we have to thrash through a bunch of these subtleties. You can't do that today. So that ought to go to the trapping committee. Thank you.
Joel?
For the record, Joel Blakesley, Nevada Trappers Association. I'm looking forward to being able to speak to some of the things I've just heard. One thing that I'm going to start doing from now on is when people say that they've seen this and they've seen that and they've seen the other thing, I'm going to ask them to quantify that. And I would like for Dr. Mulder to say how many times he's seen something. Has it been once? Has it been 100 times? Et cetera, et cetera. As far as the pack rats and the things that don't knock down our things, that's very easily solved by putting pan tension on our traps. Probably a lot of you guys don't understand what that means, but you can set your trap so a pack rat or a rabbit won't set it off. So that's very easily dealt with. There's a lot been said about changing behavior. I understand that. But let me say, first of all, let's do no harm. Because some of the things that I've heard just now have the potential to do a lot of harm. For instance, regarding binoculars, it's interesting to me that Trish is saying she doesn't want us to use binoculars. Well, in previous commissions, we've been told to get away from the road. Isn't that the message that we've heard? You take away optics, guess what? We're getting closer to the road, and we're getting closer to the trail. Simple time management. So do you want to change the behavior and create that situation? Do no harm. As far as this punitive stuff about raising the demerit points, we've been here before. All of this stuff has been talked about in previous commissions, and it's been rejected. Let me tell you what's going to happen. If you want to change psychology, you want to change behavior, okay, you put a 9 or a 12 demerit point thing on visitation. I drive out to my first trap, and I'm late for whatever reason. Maybe it's a legitimate reason. Breakdown, stuck, some other reason. Maybe it's not. But the thing that happens, a warden's waiting there and he gives me a ticket. I know that the very next trap that I check, either today or tomorrow or the next day, is going to, in essence, kill me. So what happens in your mind is psychology. Self-preservation is going to take precedence in a lot of people's mind at that point. And I've got 100 traps out. Maybe I'm just going to say, you know what? I'm not going out anymore. I'll go get them next summer. Is that what you want to have happen? When you want to get punitive, first, do no harm, because it works in other ways. What we're trying to accomplish here, and we are too, we don't want animals to suffer. But you put a big law on like that, and you're going to compound this problem 100-fold, 1,000-fold, whatever. We have laws that have been in place for 40 or 50 years. There's no need to change any of this stuff. It's worked very well for a long time. Survival psychology is a very strong motivator. And you can make this to where you're going to try and bury the guy in the mud, but you're going to cause a whole lot of problems by doing that. So, thank you. Sure.
Please clarify what you mean by disagreeing with me on a demerit system. I don't get it. If you put 100 traps out there, it's your responsibility to follow the law and visit the traps. If you're not doing it and you get caught and you get penalized, that's a fact of life.
I agree.
How many times I pulled people over and they got an excuse? I'm in a hurry to get somewhere.
Okay.
Well, my mother was killed in a car accident up in Carlin, Nevada, 4 years ago by some jerk and my uncle on I-80 because he was in a hurry to get somewhere, was driving 60 or 70 miles an hour over what the rest of the traffic was. I'm not understanding the logic here.
Okay, let me explain. And I agree with you on that. I am not,
I'm not proposing to change, I agreed with you. But it's ridiculous to have 6 or 7 or 8 times to get any action done.
okay, but the thing is, if you make it to the point where in the next half an hour, I can lose everything, and I'm not saying that I would do that. I mean, I don't want to leave a trap line out to keep on catching animals, but you're going to create that psychology in somebody's mind, and he's not going to go check the rest of his traps. He's not going tomorrow, he's not going Thursday, he's not going next month. He's not going back.
So you're saying that he's not going back to check his traps at all, and those traps are set?
Yeah.
And because he got a ticket?
He could get another ticket that same day. See, the thing is, you got 100 traps out, potentially you could get 100 tickets.
And so if he...
And you only need 2 to...
So you're saying that he is not going to go out and check his traps?
I'm-
And at that point, he's going to have traps, he's going to have animals in his traps for the rest of the season, clearly violating the law. And Indow is, if they get that, help me here, Joel, I don't understand what you're saying, because he is gonna be in violation multiple times.
Yeah, and so what are you going to do about it?
He's gonna be done.
How are you going to know if he never goes back?
Trap registration.
How are you going to know? And I'm not saying we're going to do that. I hope the hell we don't. But what I'm saying is you're going to create that thought in somebody's mind, because self-preservation is going to kick in. And he's going to say, you know what? I'm done hunting deer. I'm done hunting ducks. I'm done fishing. I'm done trapping. I'm going to turn around and go home.
But those are personal decisions. I mean,
They are, but...
And, you know, people have to, you know, a lot of us have had kids and teenagers. They, you know, you try to teach your kids certain values as you go along, and they're going to make decisions. And if they choose to make a bad one, they have to suffer consequences. And the same thing's happening here. You know, self-preservation. Self-preservation would be to go down and say, hey, I was late yesterday. I didn't get out here yesterday like I intended to. I got a whole string of traps here, and I need to get them out of the field. I've got a violation. I'm willing to take the consequences for my poor decision or my inaction of getting out here. What can we do here? It was a mistake. Live up to it. Don't just go into some kind of self-preservation mode where you just go and disappear for a while. Those are the exact people we're trying to work out of the system. They got a bad thought process.
Dave, I agree with you 100%. I am not advocating breaking the law. I'm just saying that somebody out there is going to have that thought. Whether they take that action or not, I have no way of knowing that. But we're talking about changing behavior, and we're talking about psychology. I'm just saying that that's a thought that's going to go through somebody's mind. It might not go through my mind.
Right. Do you feel obligated to defend those folks?
No, absolutely not. That's not what I'm doing up here. What I don't want to have happen is somebody leave their trap line out and have a bunch of animals just die in them, because he's afraid that he's going to lose everything and he doesn't go back. I don't want that to happen. That's what I'm urging you, to not create a situation where that's going to happen. Maybe it won't ever happen, but I'm saying it's a possibility. And if you make these things too punitive, there's going to be some negative, well, maybe there won't be. I'm just talking in hypotheticals and anecdotal. But I think you can understand where that thought process could come in. There's 1,000 or 1,200 guys out there. If one of them does it, you've created more of a problem than leaving it alone.
Well, I would hope that there would be one less.
I would hope so too.
If that was the case.
I would hope so too. But what I'm saying is understand what the potential for what you're considering here is.
Okay. We're still in public comment. We're not in commission debate at this point, so let's continue as public comment.
That's all I've got, thank you.
Dr. Lent.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Jury Lent for the record. On some of this testimony, you know, as you know, nothing is a law until it goes through the courts. And if a law is ambiguous, the judge looks at the intent of the bill that made the law. Contrary to what the legal advisor from Lyon County said, as far as laws are not clear cut. And I'm protesting making a regulation one meeting like you're doing here. And there's no chance from the work session, no changes from the work session are published that you had yesterday and available to the public until the meeting is underway. And public might not attend the meeting the next day because they don't have the change in the regulation. And you're having only one meeting, even if the meeting goes for 2 days. Now, how you get by with it with a regulation, 233B defines regulation, but exempts Department of Wildlife. The term of regulation does not apply to the setting of seasons for hunting, fishing. This trapping is not a season, it's a regulation. And so therefore, it does not fall under the 233B, the season, the fishing season. You only have to hear them once. But if you look at the bill, Senate Bill 367 that did the changes here, it said the session addresses several inefficiencies and inadequacies in the development and execution of the regulations by state agencies. And 233B was trying to protect the citizens of the state from state agencies. And the Nevada Association of Independent Businesses said they had the State Office of Labor Commission had a hearing in Las Vegas and Reno, and I'm reading from the minutes of the committee, and it says, the changes made between both meetings put people at a disadvantage without having the current language or potential suggestions from the work session. And these are things that are happening before this 233B was passed. And Senator Wiener said, when she introduced this bill, said this bill would deal with state agencies. Representatives who come to these meetings do not have the opportunity to review the intended changes with the people they represent. This bill would give them the opportunity to review the changes. That was the intent of the bill. And so the trapping people do not get a chance to go back to their constituents and review this. And that's the whole purpose of 233B, to give the public more say in it. And that doesn't mean having it at the same meeting. And Assemblyman Gonachia says, I agree, we have seen notice that there would be a work session and a public hearing at the same meeting in Carson City. It was evident that the agency did not anticipate anybody would be there, but people filled the room. Because the word leaked out, the agency suspended the meeting. These are some of the abuses that state agencies have done to the public. Assemblyman Settlemyer says, I have seen agencies bring forward a hearing and the work session automatically on the same meeting enforcing regulations. Another one was and I talked about the ram and jam from the Nevada Motor Transport Association, how state agencies ram and jam on one meeting, okay, bills through, regulations through. Another one here, National Federation of Independent Business said the participants, they had 2 hearings, one in Las Vegas and Reno. Participants on the other end did not have the benefit of knowing the findings or the comments from the other end of the state. And it's the same thing here. The trapping people or whatever regulation you're doing at the north end of the state don't know what's happening down here. The Vice President of Government Affairs Retail Association said we favor the prohibition on holding a public hearing or workshop on the same meeting or the same day. And this bill passed unanimously. So I think it's illegal for this agency to pass a regulation without having two separate meetings, because that was the intent of the bill, and you're not doing this. You're stretching, it's one meeting, you're just recessing it. And you're having one meeting and taking 2 days and saying it's on the second day. And I think that's illegal according to the 233B, and that's why I'm protesting making a regulation, any regulation, particularly this one on trapping, on the next day after the workshop yesterday.
Thank you. Come on up.
I'm Stephanie Myers from Lee Canyon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. First, I'd like to read a very short statement from Jean Perry Jones, Mount Charleston resident. She says that she's unable to be here because she's in the Civil Air Patrol FEMA training in Reno this weekend. The FEMA training for our search and rescue crews is very important. It's critical that we respond to situations in a very timely manner. Leaving people in crisis for 4 days would be an unconscionable, brutal way to respond to their needs. Just as you would not want your innocent children and families left to suffer for 4 days when imminent relief is critical and available, so too with the animals that you trap. So how long are you willing to let your innocent family members suffer pain and imprisonment? An hour? 10 hours? 24 hours? 4 days? I know you would agree that a quick intervention is best for your innocent family members as well as for your own peace of mind. The same goes for wild animals, all species, and people's pets that you catch. The sooner the intervention, the better. Not only does checking on traps within a 24-hour period meet more humane guidelines, but it's also better for the product that you're killing the animal for, its fur. The longer an animal lays in the trap, the more stress of the animal, which has a negative impact on its fur. When you're under severe stress, you shed hair, so does an animal. Also, the longer an animal lies helpless in a trap, it is more vulnerable to predators destroying the fur. So while I'm working on how quickly we can respond to crises, I would ask that you do the same. The crisis you create for the animals that you trap should be responded to within 24-hour period or less. Anything more is inhumane torture. If I could add my own comments just for a moment. 96 hours, 4 days. That's a lifetime of agony for any creature. No food, no water, rain or snow pouring down, predators snapping. Nevada's trap visitation is the longest in the country. That is unacceptable for anyone who loves any animal. Is it visitation when you tell your sick friend that you'll visit him in the hospital and then you just go and ask the nurse if he's okay? Is it visitation if you just call your bank and ask if everything is fine inside your safety deposit box? Is that visitation? Is it visitation when you ask your grandmother to stand just outside her door and you look at her through binoculars from a mile away and wave? Is that visiting your grandma? Visitation is boots on the ground, in-person inspection, no exceptions, every 24 hours. The animals the trappers kill belong to all of the people of Nevada, and they are on land that belongs to all of the people of Nevada. Trapper convenience should not be a consideration because trapping is for profit. It is a business, and it should be regulated as a business. Thank you.
Thank you. Gil?
For the record, Gil Yannick, speaking as president of Friends of Nevada Wildlife. You know, we've all listened to this for a long time. And, you know, I know we have constitutional rights about free speech, but I kind of think that in a situation that's as sensitive as this, I don't think it's appropriate to be wearing shirts that present their cause to the rest of the public at this meeting. It's like bringing electioneering material to the election booth. But the real thing I want to talk about is I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm not a trapper. But we've listened to this for a very, very long time, and I think we need to look at both sides of the situation. I empathize with those that feel very strongly about the trapping issue. They should feel strongly about it. I also see the point of view of the trappers. That's their livelihood. And from what I've asked a lot of questions of trappers to find out, so educate myself about the process and what makes furs valuable and what makes them worthless. And from an economic standpoint, leaving an animal in trap for an extended period of time really can make the fur worthless. So it behooves each of the trappers to visit the traps as often as they can and not to set so many traps that it makes it impossible, because if they're lucky enough to trap something, it's meaningless, it's valueless to the trapper. So from their own perspective, I think they know how important it is to visit the traps. This issue of 96 hours, it's a number. And most of the trappers that I talk to about this issue, we want to get out there every day, because the longer we wait, the less valuable that fur is. So it's been working at 96 hours for as long as I have been associated with the wildlife issue, and that's about 15 years. And it seemed to work. We had some issues 3 or 4 years ago that brought this whole thing to a head, and we tried to appease both sides, and I think we've done a good job doing that. The 96 hours has worked efficiently for a long, long time. Personally, I don't see a real good reason to change it. It's self-regulating. The people who are trappers know how important time is to them. And if they can get to that trap just as soon as possible, they will. Do all of them maintain and say, oh no, I got 96 hours, I got plenty of time? I don't think they look at it that way, at least not the people that I've been able to talk to. They know how valuable it is and how very important it is to visit the traps. Let's keep it that way, and I think we got registration numbers. We're gonna have registration numbers on the trap. If there's a problem, we know who the problem creators are, and we can address that. If we make it too punitive, and I agree with Mr. Blakesley, that somebody who's accidentally caused a problem is gonna be afraid to come forward. How many times do we read about people doing something wrong and lying about it and making the matters totally worse in order to avoid the hammer hitting them on the top of the head? They did something wrong, they'd like to fix it, but if the punishment is going to be so severe, they'll try to find a way to avoid it totally. And we swing the pendulum too far to one side, and we may not be helping the situation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Rex? Rex and then Mike Reese.
Rex Flowers, first talking for Washoe County Advisory Board. We need to just get this done, get it to 96 hours. That's what SB 213 was about, was to address the time frame. I believe they said right in there, 96 hours, and then to review those areas in close proximity to cities and stuff, or areas of high congestion. Now, as Rex Flowers as myself, I do not think this is a proper place to keep mentioning about demerit points and stuff. This was not agendized. It should never have come up. I would appreciate it if you would not speak any more on it. I think we're violating the law by doing so. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike and then Jana.
Mike Reese, Southern Nevada Coalition for Wildlife. Commissioner Young, I offer my condolences for the loss of your parents. That is hard, it is difficult. A number of people have had that happen. And with that mindset changing, I happen to drive along these freeways all the time. And I happen to be an electronic message unit board company, and I see message units up now, 167 deaths. We've tried for years and years, like you say, the alcohol content and everything else has been changing, but it didn't really start to have any effect, I think, until it was quantified. Why are we doing this? How many people have we lost? If you just talk about an accident or something, I mean, you can turn on the news and you hear an accident every single day. I mean, the news, you know there's an accident going to go on, you're going to find out a different route to go. I'm somewhat taken back of the fact that nobody on this board is asked to quantify it. Commissioner Young could probably tell you how many deaths are related to traffic accident because that's the line he's in. How many violations have we had in trapping? And what are those violations? Are we dealing with 1,500 violations or are we dealing with 15? I think that once people, average thinking everyday people, start to hear those figures, they understand why a change is coming about. Or they might even understand why hasn't one. With that being said, I've asked the question. This is maybe rumor, whatever. I've heard it as being 15 in 3 or 4 years. Okay, to me, I don't know, Rob could probably add some validity to that, but I got to tell you, with Joel just now saying there's 1,000, 1,200 trappers out there, knowing how many opportunities there are, bookies at the sports book couldn't get a better percentage than that. I would caution of making a drastic change without having the facts. When some of these regulations come up, I'd like to see why are we making it. Since I've been doing up this for 5 years, I got to tell you, 98% of it's been because of emotion. It hasn't been because of fact. I personally am a guy that deals from facts. And I'll be the first guy to get on a bandwagon when I say something's wrong. I mean, if we've got this going on or whatever, guys, let's get together. Let's rally the other side or go talk to them. The facts are going to speak for itself. You don't have to argue the argument. And I think Joel's passion comes from the lack that he knows that there really isn't anybody out there doing these violations like we're being insinuated. I think that once that comes out, I think you guys all ought to understand it. I, like Rex Flowers, don't have a dog in this fight. Never have trapped. I mean, I got 2 traps that were my grandfather's when he passed away. I got them. They hang on a wall as a decoration. I know what they look like. I know how they work. I've never done it. Let's stick to facts. Let's keep the emotion out of this, and let's get to the bottom of it, and let's understand why are we making a change. Please consider this. Thank you.
Ms. Wright.
Mr. Chair, for the record, Jana Wright. I'm pleased to hear that this commission is going to allow the trapping subcommittee to discuss visitation, including the use of optics and definition of visitation and the 96-hour rule. That even though this regulation today, if it's passed for 96-hour trap visitation, doesn't mean that's going to be the rule for the state of Nevada for the next trapping season, not this current one. So I appreciate that clarification from the chair and look forward to the conversation tonight. Thank you.
Come on up.
Robert Gaudette, President of Nevada Wildlife Federation. I'm here today to represent myself. For many years now, the trapping visitation has been 96 hours or 4 days, and it has served the community, the trapping community, well. There is no documentation that indicates less time would have a positive outcome. To the contrary, shortening the visitation often causes a decline in trapped animals because of the human scent being left trip after trip. In other words, if you went out every 24 hours, you'd leave a human scent. I'm not a trapper. However, I believe that the 96-hour visitation should stay as it is. It appears that the ultimate goal here is to end trapping altogether. Antis seem to ignore the fact that they too have a responsibility to promote the growth and sustainability of our wildlife and our habitat by providing positive reinforcement. How many of them have ever spent a dime on wildlife enhancement or improvement? How many of them have been on their hands and knees and helped replant burned out habitat? How many of them have ever driven for hours to help clean up a stream or a river? Or helped a deer herd stranded by a snowstorm? How many of them have ever spent time volunteering to help bring water to the mountain to help all our wildlife? Trappers, along with hunters, fishermen are directly account for more than 1 million jobs in the United States. And they generate over $67 billion a year in revenue. They also provide the vast majority of funding that allows state wildlife agencies to successfully manage our wildlife resources through license fees, excise tax, trapping and hunting equipment. How many violations have we had for visitation in the last 5 years? How many? Anybody know? It doesn't seem that we have a problem here. 30 seconds. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Dane?
Dane Bradfield, Lincoln County. We were in strong support of staying with the 96-hour check time. It wasn't in our motion, but we had a lengthy discussion with several trappers from the area that were at our CAB meeting about the definition of visitation. And the general consensus at our meeting was however somebody chooses to visit their traps should be up to them. If there is an animal in that trap and they don't see it, whichever way they chose to check it, they're in violation of the law. We have very capable and able wardens. They will get caught. It's a loss of revenue to that person. If there's a non-target animal in that trap, that means it can't catch a bobcat or coyote or whatever they're going after. And if there is a target animal, as it's been said before, you know, it can get bad, get eaten, other things over time. Anyway, we would very much recommend to stick with the 96-hour visitation time.
Brad Johnson for the Lyon County Cab. We too supported the 96-hour visitation rule, thought it was fine as drafted. Our one concern is that as it proceeds forward through the committee is that something needs to be addressed more, and I encourage that it is. We urge that it is, because our concerns, if it's not addressed here, it's going to go before the legislature again in 2 years, and it's going to get handed down that way. And so what I hope, and what we all hope, is that those who are from the trapping community and those who may have different views can find common ground together in the process, rather than what may come out of the legislature, which nobody knows what may come out of that. So that's our point of view of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Mr. Volz?
For the record, Fred Volz. I've just been listening to some of the comments and shaking my head, frankly, at the illogical conclusions that have been come to. I'll make this very quick. We have 3 game wardens in the field statewide at any given time, so the number of citations potentially being written is not very huge to begin with. and hence the enforcement is very sparse on any given issue or any regulation that this commission puts together. Secondly, if trappers are responsible and visit their traps like it's been suggested, why wouldn't they support in-person 24-hour intervals for visitation of their traps? Next, trap numbers will give law enforcement the information they need to track down the violators. If any trapper did choose to abandon responsible oversight of their lethal weapons, as Mr. Blakesley suggested, they would be very easy to find. So the trapper is only digging a deeper hole for him or herself if they choose to just walk away because they fear any sort of consequences for not doing the right thing. Another argument that's suggested that doesn't hold water, it's the trapper's livelihood is not sufficient justification to inflict cruelty on animals who don't vote, who can't speak for themselves, and don't contribute to political campaigns. And another point, let's not inaccurately name call. It's very insulting. It doesn't pursue the argument in a rational way. People who support animal protection are pro-animal. They're not anti-anything except cruelty. So don't paint them with a brush that's inaccurate. If anybody's anti, it would be the people who choose to indiscriminately kill wildlife that belong to everybody in this state. And finally, wildlife enhancement and improvement that only leads to more wildlife killing is not an honorable outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any comments or motion? Commissioner Lane.
Mr. Chair, I understand the importance of getting the 96 hours on as a stopgap measure, but after listening to the trappers today, and also because I have a real problem with the 96 hours, I don't think I could ever vote for 96 hours even as a stopgap measure. So I'm going to be voting against the proposed regulation today.
Okay, Commissioner Drew.
I just was handed a note by the secretary from Station Newman, who had to leave early, but wanted me just to put on record that she supports every 24 hours instead of 96 hours and requesting visitation to be defined as physically walking to the trap. So just wanted to make sure that was on the per her request.
All right. Anybody else? Commissioner Bliss.
Earlier when Joel was up here talking about if you're late at your first trap set and then not, and the concern of someone not going through and going to the rest of their traps, if a person's got 50 traps on the trap line, they're late to the first one, that makes them late to all of them, basically. And so if they get the first citation at the first trap set, and it's 12 demerit points or 6 or whatever, wouldn't it just add up if you have 50 sets on that trap line that you were late on? So the very first violation, he'll lose his trapping privileges at that time, unless is it different than that, Rob? Can you explain that to me?
Wait, we're off topic. We're talking about 96 hours here. We're not talking about demerit points. So we're off topic. Let's continue with the 96 hours. Let's get that out of the way, and those discussions can be had at the committee meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. Number one, as presented, the visitation has been an issue, and that to me seems like an alternative to. Now, I don't believe we need to handle it here, but my thought is that there's this concept of visitation and defining visitation has been part of this whole process, so I'm not sure how far off base we are. But I do want to, maybe I'm off base here, but tonight I want everybody to understand that we specifically agendize this pertinent to SB 213. We may not be able to talk about everything everybody thinks that we can. It's specific to 213. Now, having said that, I can assure you that we will get to it and we will deal with it if it passes on to the committee. It's just, I want everybody to understand that tonight, the things that are kind of piling up here and being delivered to the committee, we may not be able to handle as part of our agendized meeting tonight. Okay, I want everybody to understand that. But I'm hearing the messages, and we'll get them on the agenda if that's what needs to be done. So,
Okay, anybody else? Commissioner McNitch.
okay, I'll just continue on. So, the part of our problem here, listening to public comment, I think it's short-sighted to think that everybody's satisfied, that everybody's appeased. I'm not sure that that's the terminology that I would rely on. Obviously, that's not the case. That's why we keep ending up in the legislature. That's why these meetings continue on. That's why these items keep hitting discussion. So there is a rub, and we don't have to have violations. We don't have to have things that we can quantify to discuss an issue. We deal with more things on this commission than just things that are violative, that are violations that can be quantified. We have public perception issues that we have to deal with. You can't quantify those all the time. So to rest on there has to be a violation to discuss these issues isn't, we're a board that deals with public perception, thoughts, ideas, issues are brought to us. There's petition processes. When petitions are brought to us for consideration, there's no violations involved. They're thoughts, they're ideas. So that's what this process is all about. It's painful. It's really painful. And but that's the way it needs to work out. And unfortunately, for quite a while, the process wasn't working. And we're still dealing with the emotions of that a little bit, in my opinion. We had a few-year gap there where those opportunities weren't there. And so we're, in my opinion, still learning how to play in the sandbox together a little bit, everybody. And, it's a painful process, but it's a necessary one, and we'll work our way through it. So those are my thoughts.
Commissioner Drew? Oh, I thought you were leaning up. I'm hoping somebody had something to say, like a motion. Commissioner Young.
Make a motion to propose that we adopt the proposed regulation of the Board of Wildlife Commissioners LCB file number R018-13 as proposed by the Trapping Committee here before us.
We have a motion.
Can I get some clarification on that? Are you,
It's a 96-hour visitation.
oh,
Strictly as written
as
here.
stated by Commissioner Drew, the revised,
Yes.
okay. I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is everybody clear on Commissioner Drew's revised wording?
I can read it if you'd like, just to have
That
it.
would help out. That
Okay.
way we know what we're doing.
So the proposal is read at the Fallon Commission meeting yesterday and again today for, I guess, the fourth time. Section 1 would read, Chapter 503 of NAC is hereby amended by adding thereto the provisions set forth in Sections 2 of this regulation. Section 2 would read, a person who is required pursuant to NRS 503.570 as amended by Section 5 of Senate Bill Number 213, Chapter 231, Statutes of Nevada 2013 at page 1002, to visit or cause to be visited a trap, snare, or similar device shall ensure that the trap, snare, or similar device is visited, at least once each 96 hours. Sub 1, by a person who is a holder of a trapping license issued by the department, and sub 2, in a manner which ensures that any animal caught in the trap, snare, or similar device is removed from the trap, snare, or similar device.
Okay, so we're clear on the motion in a second. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
8-1 with Lane nay. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 30. Commission General Regulation 429, trapping registration number, LCB file R017-13. Rob?
For the record, Rob Bonamici, Chief Game Warden, LCB file number R017-13 was workshopped in Fallon and yesterday as well. And what you have in front of you, we heard some comments yesterday from the public. You have the original LCB version. That's the one without any yellow highlights or anything like that. And then there's a version that came about as a result of the workshop in Fallon. And so that's basically the starting point for this meeting.
Okay. Any questions of Rob from the commission? Seeing none, I'll take it out to public comment. Public comment? Rex?
Rex Flowers, Washoe County Advisory Board. Again, I would stand by what we said yesterday. The removal of rodents from section 4, so it ends as do not apply to persons trapping for protection of property. And we would want the inclusion that traps that are in transit are exempt, and that legally set traps would not be tampered with. Thank you.
Next, public comment. Dane?
Dane Bradfield, Lincoln County. I'm just echoing my comments that I made yesterday on the workshop part of it, that our CAB just mentioned that we would like to see some clarification as the people previously issued trap numbers would be able to use those instead of having to be issued another number.
Can I address that?
Commissioner Drew?
I think Ms. Hollinger can address that, and this is something that we discussed in Fallon, but it's probably good to put on record, so maybe Dane can report back to Lincoln County.
Okay, very good.
Maureen Hollinger, Nevada Department of Wildlife License Office. Those that already have been issued trap registration numbers can continue to use those. They're on the books as being assigned those numbers, so that's not going to change.
Excellent.
And Maureen, what would they need to do in order to make that happen, just through your guys' office and process?
If they can't remember the number?
Just simply contact you?
Yeah,
or
we can look it up for them.
Okay, that'll make some people very happy back home.
Okay, thank you. Next, Dr. Moldy, and then Mr. Casanelli.
Mr. Chairman, Don Moldy, Reno. Actually, I'm representing No Bear Hunt, Nevada, but I don't think I need 6 minutes worth of time. I just want to do two things. One is I support whatever trap registration regs you come up with that the department thinks are workable. Secondly, I want to add a touch of perspective, since there's some misunderstanding about this issue of trap registration and the previous issue regarding trap visitation. There have been comments by some of the old hands and new folks that everything has been fine and been working well over the last number of years, and that the commission has previously considered and rejected some of the stuff that we're discussing today, as though somehow that was evidence that things worked well. Actually, that's not true. The public has been concerned about these issues for a long time, and one of the reasons why nothing happened in the past, first of all, was the composition of the commission, which refused to do anything sensible about trapping reform other than the last 3 or 4 years. The other reason is that the legislature was not conducive to animal issues from our point of view. But due to old age and term limits, that's no longer the case. The Dean Rhodes, the John Carpenters, the Lawrence Jacobsons, the John Marvells, the Claibornes, all these guys that used to give us trouble in the legislature regarding animal issues are gone. It's a new day that's dawned, and legislators that now inhabit Carson City, particularly those in Las Vegas, seem to be more sympathetic to the kinds of public concerns that have always been there, but have not been recognized by previous commissions or previous legislatures. So I just wanted to make that perspective clear so that those in the audience who don't understand that times have changed, hopefully now will. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
For the record, Tom Casanelli with Humboldt County. Humboldt County had some concerns with the placement of the tags being within 6 inches of the trapping device. They felt that these tags could get knocked off, and we would like to see it put within 6 inches of the end of the chain or whatever, where it's connected, so it's not right at the trapping device. Thank you.
Commissioner McNinch.
And I think we've got that addressed, didn't we?
I do
Yeah, I
believe
think we've
so.
got that one covered as part of the proposed language here.
Yeah, it wasn't in support material. We discussed it in Fallon, but it wasn't in the support material. It's still at 6 inches of the trapping device.
Okay. Next public comment? Come on up, Stephanie, and then Joel.
Stephanie Myers, Lee Canyon. Why wouldn't a trapper want to put an ID on their trap? I don't understand why that would be a problem. The way the trap registration number would be affixed to the trap might be a problem if a trapper could get away with saying, "Oh, must have blown away in the wind." When my dog was caught in a trap, I incurred huge veterinarian bills. If that trap had been set illegally, I would certainly want to be able to know the person who set that trap illegally. Thank you.
Joel?
For the record, Joe Blakesley, Nevada Trappers Association. I'd be happy to talk to you, Stephanie, about that outside. Addressing the commission. It's getting thrown out here a lot about the legislature. Well, you know what? I spent 4 months down there, and I don't think we should be making laws just because we're worried about going to the legislature. I'm willing to go back there again. As far as what we're talking about right now, let's get it on. Next week, trapping season starts. I've told all my guys that it's probably pretty much okay to tag your traps, and I've been starting to tag mine. So, you know, let's make this thing happen and get on, because we got time wasting. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Jim Curran, Churchill County Advisory Board. I think one of the confusing points, even that Tom Casanelli made, is if you printed the draft regulation in color, you could see what was omitted from the Fallon meeting, but what came in support data was in black and white, and you cannot tell. And I think in regards to that 6 inches, I believe that was omitted. At least when we reviewed it at Churchill County, we assumed there was no reason to require in a regulation a location of a tag, whether it was 6 inches one end or the other. I mean, there's just no justification. I did notice, and possibly somebody can address that some of the new trappers that are getting numbers right now via the computer are being assigned numbers that do not have an NV. Now, there's nothing in here that really is the historical numbers are NV 1001, something like that. There's one of the county game board members here ended up with about a 6-digit number off of the computer that he got a couple months ago. So there is some confusion. The trappers are trying to do it right. They're trying to order tags. Season starts. There just wasn't much clarification in that regulation. As long as we can, and as Rob mentioned yesterday, we can write my grandson a note that he's authorized to use my number. I can loan him, I can trap in partnership. If I understand Rob right, then Churchill County would support this regulation as, at least has been amended from the Fallon meeting. So,
Okay, next. Nobody else, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Rob, Washoe County has suggested some provision that says legally set traps will not be disturbed. And yesterday it was by law enforcement, but I think it's a little broader than that. Is that already addressed?
It is addressed, for the record, Rob Bonamici, it is addressed with regards that it's unlawful to disturb a legally set trap. And from a law enforcement perspective, that's the approach we take as well, is if it's legally set, we have no reason to look at it or disturb it. That being said, I mean, it already applies and we're already practicing that.
Okay. And what about the traps in transit?
The traps in transit, that's quite honestly going to be on a case-by-case basis. If we have a report that Rob Bonamici stole a bunch of traps and we run across Rob Bonamici on the, out in the hills with a pickup load of traps, you bet we're going to go through those traps.
So if they're lawfully yours,
Yeah.
and you didn't mark them, then you could go through a process of validation.
Yeah. Basically, how we're going to handle that, in general, there's, I'm speaking generalities here because each situation's different. But if you have a trapper that's out in the hills with traps in the vehicle, I could picture myself asking them, hey, you're aware of the new trapping regulation, traps are required to be tagged or stamped or what have you. You mind if I look at your traps to make sure you've done that, or have you done that, depending on the situation, rather than let them go set the trap and then write them a ticket. If we can prevent the violation from ever happening, that's what we're gonna do.
So it's not a transit issue, it's where are they gonna be used for? Are they compliant if they're being used?
Right.
Any other commission comments? Seeing none, Commissioner Drew?
Two questions, Rob. Any issue with removing rodent from the provision on the exemption?
The only issue I potentially see is in conflict with 233B, that a trapping license is required to trap for mammals. And let me just double check. But I think we're gonna be okay with regards to trap registration number. That's just referencing license, so legally that can be done.
Okay, and then just so it's clear and on the record, on the second page, number 3, we talked about adding the phrase unless a valid tag is attached. And the purpose of that is if you have a number stamped in your trap and you have a tag, the tag will take precedent.
Correct, that was the intent.
That's the interpretation, that's the intent, so that everyone is clear on understanding that.
Any other questions? Commissioner Moray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This regulation applies to public land only?
Correct, based on section 4, the provisions of this section, 1, 2, 3, do not apply to persons trapping rodents. And if you remove rodents, then it wouldn't apply for private property, for protection of private property. But if you're trapping on private property for bobcats, say, you give somebody permission to trap on your property, they would need the trap registration number, based on how it's written.
Any other questions? motion? Commissioner Drew?
All right, so I will make a motion that we approve Commission General Regulation 429, trapping registration number LCB file number R017-13, as follows. Section 1, NAC 503.150 is hereby amended to read as follows. 1, a person who is required to register a trap, snare, or similar device pursuant to NRS 503.452 as amended by Section 3 of Senate Bill Number 213, Chapter 231, Statute of Nevada 2013 at page 1001, must obtain an application form for registering the trap, snare, or similar device from any office of the department. The form must be completed in accordance with the instructions thereon. 2, the department shall issue registration numbers. Each registration number, A, must be assigned to the person to whom the department issues the registration number, and B, is transferable pursuant to department policy. C, must be clearly and legibly stamped C-1 on the trap, snare, or similar device or tag, or sub-2 on a metal tag that is attached to the trap, snare, or similar device. If a metal tag is used, the tag must be attached to the trap, snare, or similar device or secured to its attached chain, cable, or wire. 3, each trap, snare, or similar device must bear only the registration number of the owner of the trap, snare, or similar device. Any other registration number must be stricken, obliterated, or removed from the trap, snare, or similar device unless a valid tag is attached. 4, the provisions of this section 1, sub-1, sub-2, sub-3 do not apply to persons trapping for protection of property. 5, the person to whom the department issues a registration number pursuant to this section shall enter the registration number on his or her trapping license.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed unanimous. We're moving on to agenda item 31. Informational reports. Agenda item 3A, 31A, update on status of wildlife rehabilitation in Nevada. Laura Richards.
I will at the next one. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Laura Richards, the Chief of Wildlife Diversity Division. I'm just going to give an update on wildlife rehab in the state, and Ms. Holger might have to help me on this. The license office issues the permits for rehab in the state. So a lot of this information is available on our website. The application is on the website. There's no fee that's required to apply for this permit. If a rehabber is interested in working with migratory birds, a federal permit is also required from the Fish and Wildlife Service, with the exception of grouse, quail, checker, and partridge and turkey. So other bird species require a Fish and Wildlife Service federal permit as well. As part of the application, information on the person's address, phone number, birth date, and so forth are required. Also, the name, business address, and telephone number, and the signature of a practicing veterinarian licensed in the state who will examine, diagnose, perform veterinary services on, and if required, euthanize the injured, ill, orphaned, or otherwise debilitated wildlife. So permits can be obtained for amphibians, reptiles, passerines, raptors, mammals, and so forth. Also required in the application is a detailed description of the experience which the applicant has in working with the species or the taxa identified in the application, including previous work, which can be verified in another rehab office. Also required is assistance from a licensed veterinarian, and also a complete diagram of the holding facilities, so very specific information on the facilities that the person is applying for this application. And again, a federal permit is required if a person is interested in rehabbing migratory birds. Documentation also requires submission of at least 2 years of practical experience, and also, again, a letter supported from a licensed veterinarian who is experienced in the care of wildlife and can substantiate the qualification of this applicant. So it's pretty stiff requirements in order to rehabilitate wildlife. Also another NAC 504.496, restrictions on and privileges of the holder of a permit. A holder of a permit to rehabilitate wildlife shall not charge a fee for any rehabilitation service he provides. The holder of a permit is solely responsible for all expenses incurred and all actions undertaken pursuant to the permit. So that's a little bit of the background. Currently, we have seven licensed rehabbers in the state. 3 of them are located down here in southern Nevada. We also have a permittee in the Elko area and several up in northwest part of the state around the Reno area. Several of them have the permits for migratory birds. Others have them for reptiles, amphibians, and so forth. And by and large, these groups, these rehabilitators, rely on donations, and so it's a tough business, and you have to have all these requirements and training in order to get a permit, and I think that kind of is a reason why we have 7 across the state, and I know it has become an issue at times down here in Clark County, all Elko as well, and Washoe County, when there's injured animals, that we get calls frequently in our agency about a wounded raptor and so forth, and oftentimes we will take them to the rehabber, but there are no state funds that support these rehabbers. So I think that's the issue, is that it's very difficult for these rehabbers with donations to maintain the facilities that are required and the training that it takes to obtain one of these permits. Maureen, do you want to add anything to that?
Maureen for Nevada Department of Wildlife. Actually, you covered it all. One stipulation I would like to state that's required from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in regards to the migratory birds. They have to not expose those birds to the public or and minimize the human exposure, so that if they are released, they're not imprinted if they're young birds, and are releasable and not habituated to humans. So a lot of times, the caging and the containment environment restricts decisions to do things too, because they actually stipulate that you have to meet the National Wildlife Rehabilitators Associations for that. So the training aspect and what they require, especially for migratory birds or threatened endangered species, really restricts I think, people's decisions to do this.
Any further questions?
Any questions? Commissioner Lane?
Mr. Chair, I asked for this to be put on the agenda because we are having issues here in southern Nevada. And I think it's a little disconcerting to me my understanding is that Endow did fund these rehabbers at one time, but as budget cuts came about, a lot of that money was cut off. Well, the problem that we're seeing, particularly with the Raptors, is that they have a tendency to run into the high rises because of the bright lights. And so they are injured. And so, you know, the issue goes, of course, you can just put them down, but the question is this going to become such an issue that, you know, we've got to try to deal with this or figure out how we can deal with it. Right now, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Wild Wing is the only group that's out there that does deal with rehab. And this is, I'm not talking about, you know, animals or anything like that. I'm just talking about raptors right now, because they're the ones that seem to have the biggest issue with the high-rise casinos. And Wild Wing has been around forever, but it struggles, it barely gets by. And I think that we need to try to, you know, take a look at some of these issues in terms of how we can assist them, or if we can work with trying to help them in terms of the local government, maybe to seek funding and seek some, I think this one woman it's one woman who works in her backyard, basically up in North Las Vegas. We have other people that have talked about it, but they haven't been able to get the licenses. But this is extremely expensive. I know that the Department of Wildlife has helped them in some instances with food, as an example, because they do have to be fed, and you know they usually don't eat just chicken out of the grocery store. But it just seems to me that we look at a lot of issues with the department, but this is an area that we really haven't dealt with a lot, and I think we ought to at least take a look at what the issues are, why the funding was cut off. I mean, obviously, there wasn't any money there, but if any of that money could be re-implemented, and how we could work with local governments to try to help these groups, either not monetarily necessarily, but influence, as an example, in trying to assist them in the job that they do, because it is a very difficult one, but I think it's a big part of, or it should be a part of what this Department of Wildlife does.
Thank you. Any other or commission comment? Commissioner Drew.
Laura, do you have any information in terms of whether there was financial support in the past, and if so, what revenue or program that would have come through?
I think some time ago, it might have been a small amount of general fund. That I do remember that there was an appropriation years ago from Senator Ensign, but it wasn't much, and it was just for like a year to help support some of those rehabbers. But other than that, it's mostly our staff's time, you know, going to pick up some of these animals and taking to the right rehabbers for rehabilitation. So it's a very limited amount of funds that go towards that.
Commissioner McNitch.
Yeah, Laura, and that's, I'm not aware. I know that, you know, the mid-'80s, you had one primary rehabilitator up in the north, and, you know, she was around for an awfully long time, and I know that, I mean, she sold her own vehicle to fund her activities for the most part, so there probably wasn't a lot of money filtering into her from any kind of a public money anyway. It was largely donations, fundraisers, things of that nature. And, you know, I think it would be just having a discussion on funding wildlife activities with general fund money, just in general, it doesn't have to be specific to anything, I think would be a fantastic discussion at the legislature. And I think that, you know, it's time to put them on the spot with some of this stuff. There are some responsibilities there. Everybody wants it to be, you know, it is the public's wildlife, so let's put some money into it. And let's quit fiddling around with it. And, you know, how do we do that? Somebody's going to pay a tax somewhere probably. And how else is it going to happen? And legislatures, you know, it's a visceral reaction. It doesn't matter which side of the ledger they're on. There might be a couple that are open to it, but outside of that, we talk about alternative funding. We've talked about it since I've been around and, wildlife stuff, there's not an appetite for it in most places. So maybe times are changing and maybe those opportunities are there that haven't been there in the past. I'd love to see some steady, consistent, trustworthy funding that can't be taken, that's not an appropriation, that we could rely on to fund this agency and deal with these issues and other broad issues, wildlife diversity and just general wildlife. I would be fully behind that.
That preps me for my next talk. Very well.
Any other commission comment? Director Wasley.
Yeah, I guess I would just like to weigh in a little bit philosophically from the agency's perspective. And wildlife rehab, it's very visible. If a bird flies into a structure, people see it, people want to help it. That's the natural instinct. But it's a little bit like triage. And the more resources, and I'm not trying to shirk the responsibility of doing that. It is very visible. But in the meantime, the more resources that we direct to those individual animals, the more resources we're directing away from population level issues. So, I mean, we have situations out on the landscape where, we've had a major limb lopped off, an arm or a leg, and we're over here messing with a hangnail on a raptor in a urban setting. And with the limited workforce that we have, the limited funds that we have, it's very, very difficult to see an ability to adequately address that while simultaneously adequately addressing the bigger issues on the landscape, which are energy development, wind, the impacts from mining, wildfire, invasives, the sage-grouse planting efforts, and in the meantime, continue to address these issues like we are in here today with fish regulations and trap identification and all those other public perceptions. So it is very visible. Animal Planet has a wide, broad viewing audience, and we've benefited tremendously from individuals who are very philanthropic and altruistic and want to do those things for those wildlife species. And without them, there would probably be fewer of many species. But I don't know how we can effectively fund that in the absence of significant emotional, financial, and physical support by people outside the agency.
Commissioner Lane.
Mr. Chairman, I can certainly understand Director Wasley's issues. I mean, we, in the dog and cat rescue business, this is an issue that we deal with all the time. Do you spay and neuter a bunch of animals and you spend the money there and save them, or do you go out and rescue the single dog that's got the broken leg? Well, trust me, you know where the money's going to come from? It's going to come from the dog with the broken leg. It's not going to come from spay and neuter. So I'm not suggesting that I think what we need to look at is the biggest issue that I see is that somebody can pick up that animal. It doesn't have to be the Department of Wildlife. You don't need to use your resources there. But the ability to get that animal somewhere where it can be at least seen, or the idea from the public that the animal's going to be provided medical care. And unfortunately, what happens a lot of times is that if a veterinarian who doesn't know what they're going to do, they're probably just going to put the animal down. Well, if it's not really that badly, if the animal's just stunned and they need a day or two, then that's how do you do that? You need that rehabber out there. And I think the thing that we're looking at is looking at the nonprofit sector to help deal with that, not necessarily using Department of, we have to, let's think outside the box instead of using your resources, but somewhere or the other, there's got to be money coming from some source to have those rehabbers. I think that's the point that I'm trying to get at, not necessarily that we use endow resources to pick up that animal and take them someplace. Does that make sense? That we've got to try to maximize those rehabbers so that there's some place so we can get them back out. I don't know about you, but I don't want to see a whole bunch of raptors with one wing sitting somewhere. You know, that's not my idea of rehab. So that's, you know, how do we help those people do that and get the right people involved so they're not spending their life savings to do that?
I would agree, and I would say that it makes it much easier on us when those people are in place out there on the landscape to assist us, and it's a lot easier to take a wounded bird to somebody else for that care, and so I would agree with you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll close that agenda item and move on to 31B, Nevada Wildlife Action Plan 2012 Revision Update. John Schoberg.
And I moved over here.
What's that?
I moved over here so I can do my presentation.
Okay.
Is that working?
Is that mic working?
I'm sorry?
Hello, can you hear? Is it working? Okay.
Maybe they can hear you. I'm Jack Staff. If you're having trouble hearing you, just go in the bathroom because I can hear a heck of a lot better back there than I can here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Laura Richards, the Chief of the Wildlife Diversity Division, and thank you, Mr. Commissioner McNinch, for leading into this subject about wildlife diversity funding. Actually, this is a photograph of Locke's Ranch, little Railroad Valley springfish, a threatened species. It's home to this spring. We actually acquired this property 7-8 years ago with recovery land acquisition funds and been restoring this property over the last few years, and right smack in the middle of Railroad Valley. Beautiful piece of property. Let's see, this is not. So to kick this off, Congress passed the State Wildlife Grant Program back in 2001 in recognition for the need for wildlife diversity funding for each state and territory. All the states in 2005 were required to develop a comprehensive wildlife conservation strategy. Now they're called the State Wildlife Action Plan, and those were required to be completed in order to continue to receive the state wildlife grant funding. Our original Wildlife Action Plan was approved by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service back in 2005. We continue to receive those state wildlife grant funds. To date, since that 2001 period, we've received about $13 million in federal appropriations to NDOW. We have to match that funding with 35%. It's a 35% match, unlike PRDJ, which is 75-25, which makes it a little harder. We rely on general fund to match this program, as well as our Section 6 program that funds Endangered Species Act fund projects in the state. And when we had a real cutback of general fund several years ago, it became a real issue for funding these programs, both State Wildlife Grant and Section 6. We receive the last few years about $500,000 in general fund to match these two grant programs. And at one point, 6 years ago or so, we had $1.7 million in general fund. So it's critical that we, have these funds coming in to match these important programs for our state. And it's just there we go. So several years ago, we coordinated and led a conservation partner planning team that included the original plan team for the Wildlife Action Plan, Department of Wildlife, Nevada Natural Heritage Program, the Nature Conservancy, Lahontan Audubon Society, and also a new partner, the Great Basin Bird Observatory. We were able to tap into a Question 1 conservation bond planning grant to fund our partners in this endeavor. NDOW also received some state wildlife grant funding to support agency staff to help with this revision of the plan. Okay. We also brought in partners from the BLM, the Forest Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Bureau of Reclamation, as well as the University of Nevada, Reno, as we updated this wildlife action plan. Oh, that one, okay. Among the 50 states, Nevada is ranked 11th in overall biological diversity, and it's 5th in the number of species extinctions. The diversity of life is derived from its geography. Many mountain ranges are effectively isolated by arid and treeless basins. And we're also uniquely challenged in approaching effective wildlife conservation, in part because of the arid climate, the geography, the limited water resources, and it's created a unique endemic biota which is easily subject to threats and stressors, including changing climate. We anticipate many conservation challenges in the years ahead, including the complex issue of changing climate and its effect on Nevada's wildlife and key habitats. Also at stake is our ability to conserve wildlife communities in the face of more frequent and widespread wildfires, the conversion of native plant communities by invasive species, habitat fragmentation, human population growth, and the alteration of hydrologic processes. So NDOW and the revision team coordinated with state, federal, and local agencies and conservation organizations to gather pertinent information as we embarked on the revision of this plan. We worked with multiple stakeholders to assess key habitats and species most likely to be affected by key stressors and developed effective strategies for managing and mitigating impacts. As part of that partnership that I mentioned earlier, the Nature Conservancy developed ecological models that predicted the risk of Nevada's key wildlife habitats to projected impacts of climate change. The Nevada Natural Heritage Program conducted a wildlife species index using the NatureServe Climate Change Index. The Great Basin Bird Observatory modeled bird population change in response to projected habitat changes in Nevada. And then Lahontan Audubon Society was the main editor and publisher of the revised wildlife action plan. So this is just a diagram of all the different products that our partners provided, the species information, the habitat change modeling, the Great Basin Bird Observatory bird analysis, and also NDOW's species analysis that all went into the conservation strategy of the wildlife action plan. The team of experts, our revision team, and conservation partners all developed the species of conservation priority list, and we ended up with 256 species of conservation priority. It does include both game and non-game species. We have bighorn sheep, mule deer, sage grouse, obviously, canvasback, includes birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, fishes, mollusks, and crustaceans. The plan is divided into 22 key habitats. This is an example of the sagebrush habitat type. We also have aspen, springs, seeps, lakes, reservoirs, Mojave shrub, and a number of other main habitat types within our state. And each key habitat conservation strategy has the habitat description, its importance to wildlife, the key habitat elements for wildlife, land uses, habitat conditions, the predicted effects of climate change and the wildlife response to those changes, the priority research needs, and also conservation actions. So we, as in the original plan, we integrate Nevada's Wildlife Action Plan into other partner plans, including the BLM Resource Management Plans, U.S. Forest Service plans, Fish and Wildlife Service recovery plans, and also CCPs, or Comprehensive Conservation Plans, tribal land plans, county planning, and so forth. Congress required that these wildlife action plans be very thorough. They have 8 required elements. All of these have to be met in order for them to be approved, including the distribution, abundance of species, the descriptions, locations, and conditions of key habitats, the descriptions of problems which may adversely affect species, the descriptions of conservation actions needed, proposed plans for monitoring, which is critical, the procedure for the review of the strategy, the plan for coordinating development, implementation, and revision with our state and federal partners and local agencies, and also a public participation requirement. We also had a number of guiding documents that helped the revision team in NDOW as we prepared this revision. The Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, AFWA, and Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Fish and Wildlife Federation worked together on several documents. One on the left is the voluntary guidance for states to incorporate climate change into state wildlife action plans and other management documents. That was developed several years ago for guidance. And also, more recently, the best practices for state wildlife action plans, voluntary guidance to states for revision and implementation. So these were really important documents as we move forward. There's also a really good document. I think I gave this to a number of commissioners about a year ago, and I have more copies. It's called Beyond Season's End, A Path Forward for Fish and Wildlife in the Era of Climate Change. It's put out by Ducks Unlimited, Trout Unlimited, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. And if anybody would like a copy of this, I have this too. It's a very good document. So here was the steps that we went through. We had some initial planning workshops back in April of 2009. We updated the commission at the December 2011 commission meeting about the process and why we were undertaking this revision. We had a public draft that went out for review in January of last year. We had public stakeholder input meetings, Las Vegas, Elko, and in Reno, and then we revised the plan based on the comments that we got from the public, through May of last year. And then back in September, we submitted the plan to the Fish and Wildlife Service for approval. There's a process where the Fish and Wildlife Service has several agency staff, and actually there's a state director from outside our state. In this case, it was the Idaho director that had a team that reviewed our wildlife action plan to see if it met those 8 required elements. And it takes a time for those people to go through it, but we actually got approval of the plan back in March of 2013. We've had it posted on our website for a couple of months, but we are just now getting the hard copies are out and available now. And we have CDs for anybody that would like them as well. It is available on our website, and our state, partners and federal agencies all have access to it, and we will be working with them as we go forward. So the Wildlife Action Plan is a 10-year plan. We will continue to receive those annual appropriations because we have finished this plan and it's been approved. We get approximately $900,000 in state wildlife grant funds that we have to match, that 35% every year. The amount that comes to Nevada and to each state is based on the size of the state and the population of the state. So for us, it's about $900,000. It has been as high as $1.3 million. California gets about 3 times as much money as we do because they're such a big state and have a lot of people there. But it's really been a critical funding source for our agency. Prior to that funding source, we pretty much relied on general fund for non-game work, and the Section 6 funds. It's been really important to our agency. Having this plan revised and updated and setting our path forward for the next 10 years is really important. So it will be the task of Nevada's conservation community to look at the 22 conservation strategies, set priorities, work with our conservation partners, moving forward to maximize natural resource protection and ensure ecosystem resiliency across the changing landscape for all wildlife. So we're really proud of finalizing and getting this plan approved by the Fish and Wildlife Service and this team from the Idaho director. We're one of the first states, all the states had to revise their plans within 10 years of that 2005 date. Most of them are still in the process. Only a few have completed them. We're one of the ones that's completed it. And so we feel really good about that. And it's, you know, it's an example for other states to follow because of the process we went through, I think was very well received. So now we have implementation going forward. A lot of great work has been done based on that first plan, and now we just take it to the next level with this updated information. There's a lot of new stressors out there from emerging stressors, expanding stressors, from accelerated energy development to invasive species to changing climate, these wildfire events that we need to be able to use these state wildlife grant funds for all those species that are within the Wildlife Action Plan, those species of conservation priority. So the funding through state wildlife grants and implementing the Wildlife Action Plan provide most of the staffing for the Wildlife Diversity Division, and also 5 or 6 positions for the Fisheries Division for the Native Aquatics Program. Currently, we use some of those state wildlife grant funds for habitat restoration. We have a grant with the Fish and Wildlife Service for habitat restoration, from aspen to sagebrush to wet meadow restoration. John, in the Fisheries Division, uses state wildlife grants for the Native Aquatics Program. We also provide state wildlife grant funds into a grant to the Habitat Division that contribute to staffing time to comment on land use plans and energy development and so forth. And we also provide some of those state wildlife grant funds in a federal grant through the Nevada Partners Program. So that money is spread throughout the agency, and going forward, there's this hope that there could be a dedicated funding source for wildlife diversity. As Commissioner McNinch mentioned, you know, we have this track record of 75 years of PR and DJ doing great things on the ground, recovering species, and the wildlife diversity funding is the third leg of that stool. And there's a lot of work at the national level to look at that dedicated funding, because an annual appropriation during these tough fiscal times is very, very tough, and the sequester and so forth have impacted, you know, the funding that comes to our state. I do have CDs here for anybody that would like a plan. I didn't bring 12 of these things down, but these huge document. But if you would like a hard copy, anybody, we can get one to you. There are a lot of the same, you know, strategies as the original plan. You know, we tried to pull in partner plans into our Wildlife Action Plan, so a lot of them are, you know, pulled together from other agency plans, other partners. But it's much, you know, it's a much improved plan, and so that funding will continue to come now to our state. Anything else, John, you would like to?
One thing I will add, it's important to understand as well, and Laura alluded to this, that this is not a dedicated trust fund like Pittman Robertson or Wallop Bro. State wildlife grant funds are dependent on an annual appropriation. So while we have found it to be really important in being able to address some of these, you know, the non-game, both aquatic and terrestrial species issues statewide, it's only reliable to the extent that it shows up every year. And those dollar values in that state wildlife grant funding, you know, can vary significantly on an annual basis. So it is an issue that as we've talked about, you know, in other topics, there is no dedicated funding resource for non-game wildlife similar to there is for game species, that's based on an excise tax or other user contribution, if you will. We're entirely dependent on the kindness of Congress, which is a rare commodity these days.
That concludes my talk. If you have any questions.
All right, thank you. It's 11:45. Let's be back here at 12:30. I think I wore everybody out. So we'll take lunch and we'll come back.